Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Melanie Wallner. On June 9, 2009, a woman who owned a house where a couple had previously lived was cleaning and preparing the place for new tenants after the former residents had moved out. She attempted to give the large wheelie bins to the garbage men, but they refused to empty them because they were too heavy and smelled bad. The bins were overflowing, and she had no idea what was inside. She and her husband struggled to lift the bins as the garbage men requested, so they took some of the contents out themselves to make it easier for disposal during the next collection. Inside the bins, they discovered a pile of trash along with several tightly sealed black plastic bags. When they cleared away some of the debris, they found what looked like human legs infested with insects. The homeowner panicked and immediately called the police to report the incident. When the police arrived, they found human remains in a wheelie bin. Those unfamiliar with crime and the smell of decomposing bodies mistook it for spoiled food, but seasoned officers quickly recognized the distinctive odor. The situation was made worse by the hot weather. The remains were in poor condition and were found inside a sleeping bag before forensic experts arrived to examine the scene and collect evidence. The bin was examined both inside and outside, resulting in the collection of several fingerprints. The police focused closely on the area around and inside the house. Despite hours of searching, they found no suspicious signs, no evidence of violence, no struggle, no robbery, and no traces that could indicate an assault or murder. The police needed to quickly identify the deceased, as this could provide new clues. They were unsure whether the victim had any connection to the house. The dumpster was located next to the house on Hamilton Avenue, raising the possibility that the body had been placed there on purpose to throw the investigation off track. The police investigated the previous occupants of the house. The last occupant was a man named Peter Wallner, who had lived alone since his wife died 3 years earlier. His wife, Melanie Wallner, was 30 when she passed away. After examining dental records, it was confirmed that the body found by the medical examiner was indeed Melanie. It is unclear how her body came to be there, as Melanie had disappeared in 2006. When asked about it, Peter burst into tears and explained that his wife had died suddenly in late summer from a brain aneurysm. This raised a puzzling question. How did her body end up in the dumpster 3 years later? The owner of the house was sure that Melanie's body was buried or cremated at the time of her death. Melanie was 30 years old. The heroine of the story was from South Africa, where she was born and raised. She was described as bright and cheerful, but around the age of 1996, she decided to move to the UK. It is difficult to imagine how large-scale this change was in the girl's life, but she dreamed of building a career and understood that in Africa there were no such prospects. From a young age, she dreamed of England and also wanted to open her own business, but first, after moving, she immediately got a job in a fast food chain to provide for herself. After a while, she was noticed, and the girl was promoted to manager of the establishment. It was during this period that she met her future husband, named Peter Wallner. Peter was an immigrant from Germany who also lived and worked in the UK. He and Melanie started dating in 2001. After a while, they decided to get married, and Melanie took her husband's last name. The couple rented a house on Hamilton Avenue, and both quickly found jobs at a local restaurant in a prestigious hotel. Peter worked as a chef, while Melanie worked as a waitress. Their friends, acquaintances, and neighbors knew them as a friendly and sociable couple. They rarely argued and were always polite. Melanie often expressed her love for her husband and her desire to have children when she was more settled. It seemed that things were going well for them. However, in 2006, their situation changed dramatically. In early September, Melanie's friends and family were informed that she had died suddenly from a brain aneurysm without warning. She had never complained of health problems and rarely went to the hospital. Peter informed her family of her death and promptly returned her ashes to them. No one knew the details of her death. To back up his story, he showed Melanie's relatives a death certificate, and they accepted his account. This information was confirmed by several others. In June 2009, Melanie's body was discovered in a trash bin, raising serious concerns about the circumstances surrounding her death. It was clear that Melanie had been murdered. Her death did not appear to be a suicide or an accident. The police quickly focused on Peter, the prime suspect in the case. He seemed to be hiding information, especially when he lied about his wife's death being due to illness. However, the police were unable to locate his new address. They traced his journey to a hotel where he had stayed after moving, but he was not there when they arrived. A search of his hotel room yielded no useful evidence, and the hotel manager could not recall anything unusual about Peter's stay, noting that he had only stayed one night before leaving the next morning. Forensic experts are working to determine what happened to Melanie and where her body had been for the past 3 years. If she had really been dead for that long, her body could not have been in the trash all that time. It must have been placed there recently. While investigating Melanie's background, the police discovered evidence of a history of deception by Peter, who had shown Melanie's family a photo of a supposedly fake death certificate. His involvement in the case became increasingly clear, making it necessary to arrest him. A forensic expert took over the case and quickly noticed that the body had been frozen before being placed in the dumpster. Another important question arose for the medical examiner when he took a closer look at Melanie's skull. He discovered a severe blow to the head, which had been caused by a blunt object. The forensic expert pointed out that if she had not received immediate medical attention after such a serious injury, she would have died about half an hour later. The evidence clearly showed that Melanie had been murdered. In order to uncover the details surrounding her death, it was necessary to speak to Peter, who was still missing. During the investigation, the police focused on the addresses where the couple had lived during their marriage and after Melanie's death. They sought information from neighbors and acquaintances who could provide insight into recent events in their lives. During the investigation, officers met with a local shop owner who said he knew Peter well, as Peter used to shop there almost every day. However, Peter had stopped coming to the shop a few weeks prior. The shop owner had heard rumors that Peter might be going abroad, possibly to visit family in Germany, but he had no specific details. The shop owner shared that, before moving out of his house on Hamilton Avenue, Peter had offered to sell him his old freezer. Peter mentioned that he no longer needed it, and the shop owner agreed to buy it for $20. The low price was due to the fact that the freezer had a very strong smell, which the shop owner could not figure out how to fix, and he subsequently gave it to his brother. This led the police to believe they were on the right track, as it was likely that the freezer had kept Melanie's body frozen for so many years. Police also spoke to the store owner's brother, who had stopped using the freezer because of the smell. Unsure of the source of the odor, he set the freezer aside without further investigation. While forensic experts did not find anything suspicious inside the house, police did discover a mattress that was almost completely covered in blue paint. The mattress was removed for analysis, and, as expected, a large amount of blood was found underneath the paint. DNA testing confirmed that the blood matched the profile of the murdered Melanie Wallner, indicating that this was where she had been killed. Pieces of plastic were found in the shed, and testing confirmed that they originated from a freezer that had been sold. Additionally, old red stains on the pieces were identified as Melanie's blood. This evidence indicated that her body had been kept in a freezer for 3 years before being discarded in the trash. Despite the information gathered, the investigation was unable to determine when the murder occurred, the motive behind the attack, or the specifics of the incident. Police contacted Melanie's family in South Africa. After her death, they received her belongings, including her diary. Upon examining them, police discovered that the couple's marriage had been deteriorating in the days leading up to her death. Melanie found out that Peter was having an affair with a woman who worked at the same hotel where they both were employed. After discovering this, she confronted Peter and told him that she knew about the affair. Peter was upset and assured her that it would never happen again. She chose to forgive him and give their marriage another chance. In her diary, she expressed her deep love for her husband and her determination to save their family and their relationship. Melanie even considered quitting her job. She believed that Peter's infidelity might have stemmed from their deep attachment to each other, as they spent every moment together without any privacy. However, Peter remained unchanged. One of the last entries in Melanie's diary revealed that she had once again caught her husband being unfaithful. The police believe this may have led to an escalation of conflict, prompting Peter to kill her. The police contacted Melanie's family for more information. They learned that the last time anyone had spoken to Melanie was on August 27, 2006. Several friends confirmed that they had had dinner with her that evening. This encounter provided important evidence, as Melanie had used her bank card to pay at a Chinese restaurant. This information helped clarify the timeline. No one saw her again after that evening, and in early September, her husband Peter announced that she had died of a brain aneurysm. A forensic pathologist examined Melanie's stomach and found undigested food from the Chinese restaurant where she had last dined with friends. This suggested that she had died just hours after their encounter, on the night of August 28, 2006. Neighbors from the house on Hamilton Avenue revealed that Peter had rented a truck to move various belongings. They quickly obtained the license plate number by contacting the moving company, allowing the police to track the truck's movements. The police began monitoring city surveillance cameras in an attempt to find the fugitive. They tracked the truck's last payment, which showed that Peter had used it about 2 weeks before the investigation began, with a stop at the port of Dover. Unfortunately, this is where the trail went cold, prompting the police to seek the public's help. They hoped that someone might recognize Peter from a photo alert. Surprisingly, it was Peter who contacted the police, expressing shock at the unusual circumstances surrounding his wife's body. He insisted he had nothing to do with it and claimed he was on holiday in Malta with his new girlfriend. The police invited him back to discuss the events surrounding his wife's death to determine whether he could be cleared of the charges. He agreed to return. Upon arriving in the UK, Peter, 30, was arrested and taken to a police station. His questioning began on June 11, 2009. Peter soon admitted that he was responsible for his wife's death, but claimed that he had acted in self-defense. According to Peter, on August 27, 2006, he had an argument with his wife, Melanie, about the state of their home. The argument escalated when Melanie became emotional and punched him in the face. She then grabbed a rolling pin from the kitchen and lunged at him, causing Peter to punch her to the ground. Peter then tried to leave, but suddenly, Melanie stabbed him 3 times in the leg. To prove his story, he showed everyone the scar on his leg. Peter felt scared, shocked, and in pain. Fearing for his life, he picked up a large frying pan and hit Melanie in the face several times with the edge of the pan. She collapsed and lost consciousness. Peter insisted that it was all an accident. Panicked, Peter decided not to call the police. Instead, he bought a large freezer and placed it in the shed, where he hid Melanie's body. Over the next few days, he cleaned out the house to erase any evidence of the fight. He then contacted Melanie's family in South Africa and lied that his young wife had suddenly died. Melanie's mother came to England to support Peter and to collect her belongings and ashes. Peter burned a large amount of old wood and boards to create ashes, which he then hid in an urn along with an engraved wedding ring. He subsequently gave the urn to Melanie's mother. Melanie's family held a memorial service, and Peter was present, appearing distraught as he delivered an emotional speech about the loss of his wife. Melanie's mother and family were shocked when they learned the truth about how she had died. Peter claimed that his actions were in self-defense and admitted to manslaughter. Meanwhile, the police reopened the case and re-evaluated the circumstances surrounding Melanie's death. They suspected that she had been beaten to death while she slept. Furthermore, a forensic expert found inconsistencies in Peter's testimony. In addition to the wound on Melanie's face, which appeared to have been inflicted with a frying pan, there was also a knife wound that Peter failed to mention. Peter could not explain how the scar on his leg had occurred, and no medical records were found to clarify this. It is possible that he inflicted the wounds on himself to cover something up. Peter later changed his story, claiming that Melanie had just woken up and left the room with a mask on, which she pulled up to her forehead before the argument began. Peter chose not to remove the mask and pulled it down to cover her face. Despite the evidence against him, Peter maintained that the crime was committed in self-defense. However, as the police presented more evidence, his demeanor changed. He became increasingly anxious and aggressive, attempting to create new justifications for the findings. The motive for the crime remains unclear, but it is suspected to be related to Peter's infidelity and a love triangle. Over time, more evidence has emerged to support this theory. Some police officers traveled to Malta to collect new clues, as Peter had been living there for several weeks. They hoped to find evidence relevant to the investigation. In the house where Peter lived with his new girlfriend, they discovered a large box filled with souvenirs and other documents, indicating that Peter was very organized. Among these items was a fake death certificate for Melanie. The police then examined phone records, letters, and other digital information. This evidence confirmed that shortly before the tragedy, Melanie had discovered her husband's infidelity, which matched the entries in her diary. Peter's new girlfriend was a colleague at the hotel. The day after the tragedy, August 28, 2006, which was also Peter's birthday, he went on a date with new girlfriend. They returned to Peter's house and spent the night there, in the same bed where Melanie had been murdered just the day before. When confronted about this, Peter denied everything and offered numerous excuses, but it was clear that he was lying. Peter went on trial in May 2010. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter and obstruction of justice. While Peter maintained that he acted in self-defense, the evidence presented by the police and the prosecution was compelling. The prosecution argued that Peter had acted intentionally. They believed that Peter wanted to continue his relationship with his new girlfriend and saw Melanie as an obstacle. The prosecution contended that murder was unnecessary. Peter could have simply ended his marriage since they had no children and no assets to divide. The couple did not have any insurance, which ruled out any financial motive. Peter soon broke up with his co-worker and began dating other women while pretending to be a grieving widower. One of his girlfriends had a daughter with him and later recounted their relationship in court. She explained that when Peter found out she was pregnant, he was initially confused but agreed to support her decision to keep the baby, promising to be there for her. However, he left for Germany shortly afterward, claiming that his father had died and he needed help with the funeral. He stayed to support his grieving mother, later telling his girlfriend that his mother had also died of a stroke and that he needed to arrange another funeral. He frequently disappeared for periods of time. When he reappeared, he said he had been in the hospital with kidney problems, although she had seen him around town. She later gave birth and raised the child alone. She discovered that Peter had been lying to her the entire time. He was a pathological liar. However, she never believed that he was capable of murder and was shocked to learn what he had done to his wife. The prosecution reconstructed the events of that tragic day, August 27, 2006. Melanie returned home from dinner with friends at a Chinese restaurant and went to bed. At that moment, Peter saw an opportunity to get rid of his troublesome wife. He wanted to ensure she was defenseless, so he picked up the heaviest frying pan in the kitchen. He smashed the pan into his sleeping wife's face several times, knocking her unconscious and fatally injuring her. For 3 years, Melanie's body was hidden in a freezer in the shed. When Peter finally decided to leave his Hamilton Avenue home, he planned to go to Malta with a new girlfriend. However, Peter faced a problem. He needed to dispose of Melanie's body to avoid arrest. He decided to put her body in a sleeping bag outside. He wrapped it in cling film and placed it at the bottom of a wheelie bin, covering it with black bin bags. Peter asked his neighbor to move the bin outside before the rubbish collectors arrived. The neighbor agreed and pushed the bin out of the way. Noticing that it was unusually heavy, the cleaners refused to move an overloaded bin. Had everything gone according to plan, Melanie's body would have been dumped in a landfill, allowing him to escape detection. Fortunately, her body was discovered. He even sold the freezer in which Melanie's body had been stored for 3 years. This decision was a serious mistake, as it gave the police access to vital evidence. The defense made several attempts to substantiate Peter's claim of self-defense, but his account appeared implausible. Following the trial, Peter Wallner was convicted of murdering Melanie Wallner and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Lauren Kanarek. Michael Barrassone, an Olympic equestrian champion, was regarded as one of the world's top trainers. He coached other Olympic athletes and represented the USA at the 2008 Beijing Olympics. Barrassone owns 2 beautiful horse farms, one outside Palm Beach and one in New Jersey's prime horse country. He calls this one Hawthorne Hill, a paradise for horse enthusiasts. The property housed dozens of horses that required constant care. Lauren Kanarek contacted Michael with the dream of becoming an equestrian champion. Her passion for horses began at the age of 3, when she and her parents visited a small horse farm in Wellington, Florida. Seeing a horse for the first time left a lasting impression, and from that moment, she couldn't stop thinking about these animals. As she grew older, her desire to pursue equestrian sports only strengthened. Recognizing her passion, Lauren's father bought her first horse as a graduation gift, allowing her to fully embrace the hobby she loved. In March 2018, at an equestrian competition, Lauren caught the attention of Michael after her performance. Michael approached her and invited her to train at his equestrian club in New Jersey for Lauren, who was actively searching for the best trainer. This was an incredible opportunity. She was thrilled by the chance to train at Michael's prestigious club. However, no one could have predicted the challenges that lay ahead for both Michael and Lauren as they worked together. The one thing they undeniably shared was a deep, mutual love for horses. By that time, Lauren owned 2 horses. Michael spoke passionately about his equestrian club, saying, "This was my life. It was my home. I built it from scratch. It was my love." Michael provided Lauren with accommodations at his farm in New Jersey, where she moved in with her boyfriend, Rob Goodwin. They agreed that Lauren would pay Michael $5 a month for her training and housing. Lauren stayed in a white farmhouse that Michael shared with his assistants, Justin Harden and Mary Haskins Gray, who also worked in the equestrian field. Michael and Mary were not just colleagues. They were in a romantic relationship. Mary, who was divorced, had 2 children from her previous marriage, a daughter and a son. The group lived together peacefully, and Michael had a good relationship with everyone. For Lauren, it seemed as though her childhood dreams had come true, and her life appeared to be going well. She even shared photos on social network of herself with Michael, believing everything was perfect. However, her coach found her to be a challenging and demanding student. Stable workers noted that by the summer of 2019, tensions had risen between Michael and Lauren. The issues began when most of Lauren's sessions were led by his assistants, Justin and Mary. Lauren had hoped to train directly with the Olympic champion, not with his assistants. Each day, the atmosphere on the farm seemed to become increasingly intense, as though something terrible was about to happen. Lauren and Mary's relationship became increasingly strained Lauren resented Michael for spending more time with Mary and wanted all his attention for herself. Unwilling to let anyone stand in her way, Michael understands the conflict but doesn't want to push Lauren away since she pays him every month. At the same time, he wanted to protect his romantic relationship with Mary. Frustrated, Lauren wasn't willing to accept the situation. Lauren, an active social network user, quickly launched an online campaign. She shared a narrative using a chessboard analogy. Michael was portrayed as the king trapped and defeated, while Mary was depicted as the queen who would need to be sacrificed to protect the castle. The stables. 2 weeks later, Lauren posted a message. Anyone who continuously kicks a sleeping beast will sooner or later wake it up. Tensions in the Hawthorne Hill had reached a breaking point. Lauren expressed her growing concern for her horse's well-being to her father, saying, "They're the reason I wake up in the morning, and the reason I can't sleep at night." She believed her horses were being mistreated, claiming they were either underfed or overfed. Meanwhile, Michael's staff accused Lauren of violating the barn's rules, with one stable worker alleging that they had seen her sneaking into the barn at night. Rumors began to circulate that she was planning to do something with the horses. Lauren defended herself, explaining that one of her horses required special care. She and her boyfriend, Rob, hid a recording device in the barn. As Lauren claimed, she felt unsafe around Michael's staff. At the same time, she posted another angry message on social network, accusing Michael of racism and homophobia. Michael, enraged by the accusations, vehemently denied them, fearing the damage they could do to his career. The Olympic champion, who had worked for years to build his reputation, was terrified that everything he had achieved was being undermined. In her next post, Lauren claimed that the 6'3" man had been bullying her, leaving her fearful for her safety. However, there were no witnesses to support her allegations, which worked in Michael's favor. The stable staff, unaware of the full story, feared that something terrible might happen. Michael revealed that living with Lauren and her boyfriend under the same roof had become intolerable. He asked Lauren to take her belongings, including her horses, and leave with Rob. However, Lauren had no intention of leaving. Eventually, Michael and Mary decided to leave the house themselves. They relocated to Michael's winter property, just 30 minutes from Palm Beach, Florida. Mary's daughter was sent to camp, while her son went to live with his biological father, as staying together with the children no longer felt safe. On July 31, 2019, at 9 p.m., Michael called the police, saying, "There's a war going on, and it needs to be dealt with right now. I've had enough. They threw us out of our home, and I need to deal with this tonight. I need them to leave." The police dismissed the call as a standard landlord-tenant dispute and did not intervene. Michael later described his turmoil, saying, "My paradise had turned into hell. I walked outside and circled the house all night. Without stopping, it was like that every day. I wasn't sleeping, and I wasn't eating." Lauren continued her online harassment, posting another message on social network filled with accusations and threats. On August 3, 2019, at 9:35 a.m., Michael contacted the police again, stating, "They're crazy, they're stalking us, and we're afraid for our lives." However, Lauren's father dismissed Michael's calls to the police as fabrications. It was later revealed that Lauren had filed a complaint with Safe Sport, an organization that investigates misconduct in sports. Accusing Michael and Mary of mistreating her, Lauren alleged that Michael had intimidated and verbally abused her, though she did not accuse him of physical violence. On August 7, 2019, a van arrived at Michael's home, and a woman stepped out. She turned out to be a social worker from the New Jersey Department of Children and Families. She approached Michael and asked, "I need to speak with Ms. Mary. Where can I find her?" Michael called Mary over. The social worker intended to check on Mary's children, but the children were not at home at the time. The barn staff reassured the social worker that the children were well cared for and treated kindly by Michael and Mary. Social worker confirmed that there were no social problems in their family. However, the implication of potential harm toward children deeply upset Michael, feeling pushed to his limit. He decided to take decisive action inside his office. Michael opened a safe and took out a black and pink weapon. He left the house, got into his truck, and drove down the gravel road to the farm where Lauren and Rob were staying. What happened next remains uncertain, but at 2:13 p.m. that day, Lauren called 911, struggling to breathe. She said, "I've been attacked in the heart. Michael Barrasone attacked me. Please help." While she was on the call, the sounds of a fight between Rob and Michael could be heard in the background. When the police arrived, they found Rob holding a badly beaten Michael down on the ground. Rob had the weapon in his possession. The officers immediately handcuffed Michael. Lauren was in critical condition. Lying on her back, pale and nearly gray, she was rushed to the hospital for emergency surgery. Doctors were uncertain if she had suffered brain damage. To stabilize her, Lauren was placed in a medically induced coma and connected to tubes supporting her body. Meanwhile, Michael was also hospitalized. When he woke up in a hospital bed, he saw himself handcuffed to the bed rail. He claimed to have no memory of attack Lauren, as if his mind had been completely wiped the following day. Michael Barrasone was charged with attempted murder and faced the possibility of an 80-year prison sentence. Confused and furious, he couldn't understand how it had all happened. Lauren remained in a coma for 4 days, followed by 3 weeks in the intensive care unit, unable to speak due to being on a ventilator. She eventually recovered enough to talk to the police after being moved to a regular hospital room. Lauren explained that Michael had been hiding behind a bush near her back porch, unaware that he had a weapon. She approached him and started talking. Suddenly, Michael pulled out the weapon and attacked her twice. Rob was nearby, witnessed the attack. Rob stated that Michael also attacked at Rob, but missed after Rob hitting him on the head, a blow that was likely the cause of his memory loss. Rob stating, Lauren didn't have time to say anything to Michael before he pulled out the weapon. He wasn't there to talk, he was there to kill them. Meanwhile, Michael's defense argued that Lauren had deliberately driven him to a mental breakdown. Mary testified during the trial, describing the summer of 2019 as a particularly difficult time. She said Michael was anxious, frightened, and frequently panicked. Michael spent over 2 years in prison until spring 2022. His high-profile trial eventually began and lasted nearly 3 weeks. During her testimony, Lauren was asked if she had ever planned to ruin Michael. She admitted, at some point, yes. Michael's defense team employed a rare strategy, arguing that he had temporarily become insane and was mentally unbalanced. The doctors asserted that Lauren gaslit him, manipulated his perception of reality, and drove him beyond his breaking point. However, Nagel, Lauren's attorney, suggesting that Michael's memory lapse was selective, affecting only the crime itself while leaving other memories intact. The court found Michael Barrasone not guilty of committing a crime against Lauren Kanarek. The jury concluded that, at the time of the incident, Michael was not mentally stable. He was not held criminally liable for his actions on that day at the equestrian club. The judge declared Michael the true victim in the story. After the verdict, Michael burst into tears and collapsed into his lawyer's arms. His legal team rejoiced, calling it justice. Michael considers the day of the verdict the best day of his life. Reflecting afterward, Michael said, "I was lost. I'm like a rudderless ship. The world as I knew it is gone. So now I have to build a new world." Lauren's lawyer is determined to seek justice and refuses to give up. He firmly believes the court's decision is unreasonable and considers Michael a criminal who deserves the maximum penalty. Lauren's father also believes the jury was wrong and insists that Michael should be sentenced to life imprisonment. A few weeks after the verdict, Michael was transferred to a psychiatric hospital. After undergoing evaluation at the psychiatric hospital, Judge Stephen Taylor ruled that Michael should be moved to a less restrictive facility. His supporters remain hopeful that he will soon be allowed to return home. In November 2023, Michael was released, but still requires regular psychiatric treatment. Meanwhile, after enduring several rounds of surgeries and treatments, Lauren has returned to horseback riding. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case. The case of Carla Faye Tucker. The events began on the morning of June 13, 1983, when the Texas Police Department responded to an urgent call from a man. Officers were dispatched to a house in the northeastern part of the city. Inside, they discovered the bodies of a man and a woman who had been brutally killed with a pickaxe. Initially, investigators suspected the murders were the result of a robbery gone wrong, but the sheer savagery of the crime made this theory unlikely. Once the victims' identities were confirmed and their backgrounds investigated, new revelations emerged that drastically changed the direction of the case. Houston, Texas, with a population of over 1 million, is the largest city in the region and the hub of Harris County. It is home to people of various religions and cultural backgrounds who live together in this diverse community. However, as the population grows, so does the crime rate, and Houston is now ranked among the top 100 most dangerous cities in America. On the morning of June 13, 1983, a man waited for his colleague, Jerry Lynn Dean, to pick him up for work. Jerry, however, never arrived. They had recently signed a contract for a security system installation job, and he knew Jerry was not the type to miss work without a good reason, since they lived close to each other. He decided to check on Jerry after waiting for some time, assuming his colleague might have overslept. When Gregory reached Jerry's apartment, he noticed the door was slightly open. He stepped inside and called out for Jerry, but received no response. He found the TV and the sound system were tangled together, and Jerry's motorcycle, which Jerry had been working on, was gone. Concerned, he began searching all over the apartment. Eventually, he opened the door to the guest bedroom. Little did he know that he was about to discover something horrifying. Jerry was found lying on the floor next to the bed, surrounded by a pool of blood. On the bed was a woman unfamiliar to he, with a pickaxe lodged in her chest. Horrified by the gruesome scene, he fled the apartment and went straight home to call the police. When the police arrived at the apartment, they observed that the space was in disarray, with tools, motorcycle parts, and dirty clothes scattered across the floor. In the guest bedroom, they discovered the bodies of Jerry and the unknown woman. The officers documented the crime scene, including the pickaxe, which was identified as the murder weapon. One officer removed the pickaxe from the woman's chest and placed it aside for collection as evidence. The bodies were sent to the Harris County Medical Examiner's office for autopsy. During questioning, the colleague said to the investigators that the apartment door had been open when he arrived, and the interior looked as though someone had ransacked it. He also noticed that Jerry's motorcycle and blue Chevrolet El Camino pickup truck were missing. A search of the apartment revealed that both victims' wallets had also disappeared. Additionally, investigators discovered that the bird hammer used in the attack was taken from Jerry's toolkit. The detectives found no evidence of forced entry into the apartment. Neighbors mentioned hearing loud noises from the apartment early in the morning, but did not call the police, as they neither heard cries for help nor explosion and assumed nothing serious had occurred. Investigators theorized that the perpetrator was either someone the victims knew and willingly let in, or someone who entered through a door that was accidentally unlocked. Meanwhile, the severity of the attack pointed to the possibility of a premeditated murder. The autopsy revealed that Jerry sustained 28 pickaxe wounds, a head injury caused by a blunt object striking the back of his skull through fingerprints. The police identified Deborah Ruth Thornton as the second victim. She suffered 15 pickaxe wounds to her head and chest, with a fatal strike piercing her heart. After ruling out random theft, investigators turned their attention to the victim's close contacts. Jerry had met Deborah just the day before at a pool party. This was the first time they had met. Friends at the party stated that Deborah had attended to relax and escape her personal problems. Further inquiries revealed that Deborah was married and had 2 children. So, suspicion first fell on her husband. The husband was questioned and told investigators that on the evening of June 12, he had been at home with his children. He acknowledged that he and his wife had been having misunderstandings recently, but insisted he loved her and would never harm her. He claimed to know nothing about Deborah's infidelity and said he had never heard of a man named Jerry before. Investigators confirmed the husband's alibi and ruled him out as a suspect afterward. They learn of another person who may have held a grudge: Deborah's father, William. William had a criminal past, including a conviction for assault, for which he had served time. He currently owned a large business in Texas, but was under investigation for tax evasion. Further investigation revealed that Deborah had once been called to testify in court against her father, which could have provided a motive for murder. William was questioned, but he denied any involvement in the crime. Investigators kept him under surveillance for several weeks, but found no evidence connecting him to the double murder. Another team of investigators began looking into Jerry's past, uncovering that he, too, was surrounded by complex relationships. Jerry worked as a mechanic, and among those who knew him, a woman named Carla Faye Tucker. Carla, known for her love of partying, had a strained relationship with Jerry. The tension started when Carla first met Jerry, the boyfriend of Sean. From the start, she had a poor impression of him. She thought he was weak and unsuitable for her best friend. Their conflict escalated after an incident at Carla's apartment. Jerry had parked his motorcycle in her living room, and oil leaked from the bike, staining her carpet. Furious, Carla eventually kicked Jerry out of her apartment that night. In the months that followed, their animosity deepened. One day, when Carla and Sean planned a trip to see their favorite bands, Jerry became very upset. He found Carla's photo album and cut out all her pictures, including the only photo she had with her mother. This act infuriated Carla, and she tried to persuade Sean to end her relationship with Jerry. However, instead of separating, Sean and Jerry moved in together and got married. Despite everything, Carla remained convinced that her friend had made a mistake by choosing Jerry. A month after the wedding, Sean visited Carla's house to collect a jacket. During the visit, Carla mentioned that she no longer wanted to see Jerry. Upon hearing that Jerry had parked outside near her house, Carla stormed outside, confronted him, hit him in the face, and broke his glasses. This incident led to Jerry being taken to the hospital to remove glass fragments from his eye. In June of the same year, Sean and Jerry separated, citing accusations of domestic violence and clashing lifestyles. In retaliation for the alleged abuse she claimed to have suffered, Sean withdrew a large sum of money from Jerry's account and went shopping with Carla. After hearing this, Jerry allegedly began plotting his revenge. Rumors circulated that he had hired someone to attack Carla, intending to disfigure her. Their volatile relationship quickly attracted the attention of investigators. Carla was born on November 18, 1959, in Houston, Texas. To Larry and Carolyn, she had two much older sisters who were said to have negatively influenced her. This influence contributed to Carla starting to smoke at just 8 years old. When she was 10, her parents divorced, and she discovered that Larry was not her biological father. By the age of 12, Carla had begun use with banned substance and lived loosely with men. At 14, she dropped out of school and, following her mother's example, started working as an escort. Carolyn even taught Carla how to use her body to earn money. Around this time, Carla's sister introduced her to men who frequented biker clubs. Carla and her mother also became passionate fans of rock music and began traveling with music groups, embracing a carefree and unconventional lifestyle. Carla adapted quickly to this new way of living. At 16, she met Stephen Griffith, a laborer, and the two planned to marry. However, Carla found married life overwhelming. They frequently argued, and their fights often turned physical. Stephen even told his friends that Carla could hit harder than any man he knew. After 2 years of constant conflict, they decided to separate, and Carla returned to her previous lifestyle. When Carla was 20, Carolyn passed away. By that time, Carla had returned to spending time in biker clubs. It was during this period that she became close friends with Sean Dean. Their bond grew strong, The detectives questioned Carla. She admitted to having disagreements with Jerry, but denied any involvement in the crime. Carla allowed the police to take her fingerprints and initially agreed to a polygraph test, but later refused it after her boyfriend advised against it. The fingerprints provided no useful leads, as experts couldn't find viable evidence at the crime scene or on the murder weapon. However, Carla's sudden refusal to take a lie detector test made the detectives even more suspicious of her. Even so, this was not enough to add Carla or Sean to the list of suspects. Detectives continued visiting them regularly, hoping one of them would slip up. Carla appeared completely unbothered and carried on with her life. Attending parties as usual, weeks passed, and detectives still could not find any evidence linking of them. A detective from the homicide department took an interest in the case after hearing the name Daniel Ryan Garrett. Carla's boyfriend, the detective, had grown up in the same neighborhood as Daniel and also acquainted with Daniel's ex-wife. The detective contacted Daniel's ex-wife and asked if she had any information about Daniel or Carla's potential involvement in the Houston double murder. She confessed that she had not seen her ex-husband for a long time and expressed a desire to talk to him about it. On July 18, 1983, the Houston Police Department received an urgent call, judging by the voice on the other end of the line. The caller sounded extremely nervous. He demanded to speak specifically to this detective. It was Daniel's brother, and he claimed to have information about the murder. Daniel's brother confessed that he had kept this information a secret for 5 weeks. He also mentioned a third individual, James Leibrandt, a friend of his, who was present at Jerry's house on the night of the incident. He warned that the situation was escalating because Carla had been talking about killing one of the witnesses to silence them during his interrogation. He said that early in the morning of June 13, Daniel and Carla arrived at his house in a blue pickup truck. Carla bragged that she had taken care of Jerry and an unidentified woman, and both of them asked him to help destroy the evidence. Initially, he hesitated to get involved, but ultimately decided to assist. He burned Jerry's wallet in an ashtray, and the stolen motorcycle parts were dumped into a nearby ditch. On July 20, 1983, Daniel's brother rode a motorcycle to Carla's house with a transmitter hidden under his shirt and a recorder concealed in his shoe. The detective and the investigative team listened from a surveillance van parked a block away. Daniel's brother casually started the conversation, carefully guiding it toward the topic of the killing. Ultimately, the suspect, Carla, provided a detailed account of what happened on the night of June 12. Carla had organized a birthday party for her sister. The celebration lasted the entire weekend, with friends coming and going, drinking alcohol, and using banned substance, which were plentiful in the house. By Sunday evening, when only James, Daniel, and Carla remained, she told Daniel that she felt overwhelmed with emotions and energy. The three of them began discussing a planned crime, and Carla suggested stealing Jerry's motorbike and selling it for parts to make money. She expressed her deep hatred for Jerry and said she wanted to make him pay for everything he had done to her and Sean. Around 3 a.m., they went to Jerry's house. They entered without any trouble because Carla had stolen an extra set of keys several weeks earlier. At the time, she didn't know why she had taken the keys, but they ended up being crucial on the night of the murder. During a recorded conversation, Daniel's brother asked if they had planned to kill anyone when they entered the house. Carla replied no, explaining that everything had happened spontaneously at the time. Carla was intoxicated and under the influence of banned substance. She sat on top of Jerry as he woke up. Trying to restrain him, Jerry attempted to free himself by grabbing her hands, but at that moment, Daniel struck him multiple times in the head with a hammer while in her drunken and drugged state. Carla became irritated by the gurgling sounds Jerry, who was dying, was making in a fit of rage. She grabbed a pickaxe and struck his body with it. Carla later admitted that using the flat side of the pickaxe gave her a feeling of arousal. Daniel struck the final, deadly blow to Jerry's head with the hammer and then left the room. At that moment, Carla noticed a woman hidden under a blanket in the corner of the bed. Up to that point, she had been so focused on Jerry that she hadn't realized someone else was there. Carla and the woman began to struggle. Their fight continued until Daniel returned, overcome by rage. Carla attacked the woman repeatedly with the pickaxe, eventually driving it straight into her heart. Daniel was arrested just a block from his home while heading to work. At the same time, armed police officers entered Carla's house to take her into custody. James Leibrandt, who was visiting Carla as a guest, was also arrested at the police station. All of Carla's friends were questioned. They shared what they knew, providing consistent accounts, and all noted that Carla had always disliked Jerry. However, both Carla and Daniel remained silent during questioning. Carla claimed she had been drugged and could not remember anything about that night during the investigation. Leibrandt cooperated with authorities and testified against Carla and Daniel. He claimed that after using the banned substance, he felt restless and needed something to relieve himself, leading to his involvement in the theft scheme ultimately resulted in Leibrandt receiving a light sentence. Carla and Daniel were charged with the murders of Jerry and Deborah. Both were held in Harris County Jail without bail. In September 1983, they appeared in court, but their trials were held separately. Carla faced charges for both murders, while Daniel, after testifying at a hearing, had the charge for Deborah's murder dropped. Carla pleaded not guilty and remained in jail, awaiting her trial. During her detention, jail staff reported that Carla behaved defiantly and provocatively. Everything changed, however, while awaiting trial. She began to recover from the effects of alcohol and banned substance. She started reading books from the prison library and, for the first time in her life, picked up a Bible. Later, Carla admitted to her cellmates and the staff that it was during this time she began to understand the consequences of her actions. She started attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, where she met others whose lives had been destroyed by these toxic things. Inspired by their stories, Carla created her own Bible study group and resolved to become a better person. When Carla repented, she realized that the Lord forgives those who are lost. She came to believe that holding on to guilt and failing to seek forgiveness blocks one's connection to God and fills life with bitterness. Feeling forgiven by the Lord, Carla's heart became filled with love, which she believed should guide her life. In 1984, Carla stood trial for the murder of Jerry and Deborah. She explained that, at the time of the crime, she was heavily under the influence of banned substance and alcohol. Carla said that the murder was not planned, but occurred as a sudden outburst of anger during a robbery. Fueled by the substances she had consumed, several witnesses for the defense supported her lawyers, arguing that Carla and Daniel, on that night, were unable to distinguish right from wrong. However, the jury could not reach a unanimous verdict on her guilt. Carla was given the chance to testify on her own behalf before the judge made the final decision. She spoke for nearly 5 hours, sharing details about her past and stating that only after being imprisoned did she fully understand her actions. Despite her emotional testimony, Carla was ultimately sentenced to death by lethal injection, becoming the only woman in Texas to receive this punishment. In November 1984, Carla testified at Daniel's trial, hoping he would not be convicted. However, he was also sentenced to death. That marked the last time Carla and Daniel saw each other, while the legal system labeled Carla a murderer. Many saw her as a symbol of reform, initially resigned to her fate of dying by lethal injection. Carla's outlook changed in 1993 when she learned that Daniel, who was awaiting execution, had died of liver disease. This motivated her to fight for her own life with the support of a prison chaplain. She began the process of appealing her case. Carla appealed to have her death sentence reduced to life imprisonment. Her request gained support from notable figures, including Pope John Paul II, the Prime Minister of Italy, Romano Prodi, U.S. House Speaker Newt Gingrich, and televangelist Pat Robertson. Surprisingly, Ronald Carlson, the brother of the victims, Deborah, also supported clemency after witnessing Carla's transformation during her time in prison. Even Hans, the warden of the Huntsville's prison, testified that Carla had been an exemplary inmate. The decision now rested with the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles, which was responsible for recommending whether her death sentence should be commuted. However, the final authority belonged to Governor Texas George W. Bush. On January 28, 1998, the board rejected Carla's request. In response, she wrote a letter to Governor Bush, acknowledging her actions as acts of extreme cruelty and recounting her journey of transformation. Despite her plea, the governor denied her final appeal just hours before her execution, refusing to commute her death sentence to life imprisonment. On February 2, 1998, Carla requested a peach, a banana, and a salad, with dressing as her last meal, according to prison authorities. She spent the morning with her family from 8 a.m. to noon. While many hoped her final hours would remain peaceful, others anticipated that the day would be emotionally difficult for all involved until the very end. People awaited the governor's decision. Would he grant her mercy? On February 3, 1998, Carla Tucker was executed by lethal injection in Texas. She had requested the presence of her sister, Kari Weeks, and some friends during her final moments at 6:45 p.m., 8 minutes after the injection. She was pronounced dead. Carla was the first woman to be executed in Texas in 135 years since the reinstatement of the death penalty. Carla was buried at Forest Park, Lawndale Cemetery in Houston later. Accusations arose against Governor Bush, alleging that he lacked compassion for Carla during the appeals process. In response, Bush issued a statement expressing that he had forgiven her, but emphasized that justice still needed to be served for the 2 lives she had taken. Carla inspired the creation of several fictional characters in stories that explored her troubled upbringing and how it eventually led to her crimes. Fred Allen, the execution team's captain, revealed that overseeing Carla's execution caused him deep emotional turmoil. He later resigned from his role in the Texas prison system and became a vocal critic of the death penalty. Allen argued that no one has the moral right to take another person's life, even if it is sanctioned by the law. He also shared that when Carla was brought in, he realized she was the first woman scheduled for execution, and he vividly remembered the details of that day. Carla looked at him and said, "Thank you, Allen, for everything you are doing." Allen replied, "You're welcome," and fastened the safety strap. Other members of the team carried out the necessary procedures, and everything proceeded as expected. When Carla was pronounced dead, Allen and the others placed her body on the stretcher, removed the straps, and went about their usual tasks. However, shortly afterward, Allen suddenly imagined the pain Carla must have felt. He broke into a cold sweat, began trembling, and burst into tears. It was a deeply shocking experience for him. The changes Carla underwent in prison profoundly affected many who had initially seen her as nothing more than an antisocial individual. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, United States. His father, chemist Lionel Herbert Dahmer, and his mother, Joyce Annette Dahmer, faced various challenges. Joyce struggled with depression and possibly other mental health issues, which required her to take large amounts of medication, even during her pregnancy. Despite these difficulties, their first child, Jeffrey, was born healthy and displayed a cheerful and curious personality in his early years. However, when he was about 5 years old, he developed a double inguinal hernia and required surgery. Initially, Jeffrey was described as an active and cheerful child, but after the surgery, his parents observed a change in his demeanor. He seemed more withdrawn and showed signs of depression. One day, Jeffrey witnessed his father taking an animal carcass from under the house and placing it on a tray. The sight caught Jeffrey's attention, and he became curious. Without hesitation, he began playing with it. His father, Lionel, whose job and academic career required him to move several times, eventually earned a doctorate in chemistry. This achievement led Jeffrey's family to settle in Bath, Ohio, where they found a large plot of land surrounded by trees. After moving to Ohio, Jeffrey began to avoid social interaction, preferring solitude, however. He cherished the time he spent with his father, participating in various activities together, such as fishing. Jeffrey enjoyed watching his father prepare fish and was curious about what was inside them. Lionel noticed this passion in his son and suggested that he learn taxidermy. Although Jeffrey did not experience physical abuse at home, he grew up in a tense atmosphere. His parents, Lionel and Joyce, argued frequently. Lionel often criticized Joyce for not taking good care of their son, while Joyce expressed frustration with Lionel's long hours at work and school, feeling that he was neglecting the family. Over time, they realized that Jeffrey was quite withdrawn and had difficulty connecting with others. When Jeffrey was 7, he got his first pet, a dog. This brought him immense joy, and he took great care of the dog, even bringing it along when he explored the area for animal carcasses. At the same time, Joyce became pregnant with their second child. To help Jeffrey feel included, his parents allowed him to choose a name for his younger brother, which he decided would be David. Jeffrey attended primary school in Bath, where his father made efforts to encourage him to socialize with other children. Although these efforts were largely unsuccessful, on weekends, Lionel spent time with Jeffrey, tending to the garden and bees together, and attending local fairs. Their relationship was strong, and Jeffrey even wrote poems for his father during this time. His mother, Joyce, was hospitalized for depression and anxiety, which was a difficult period for the family. When Jeffrey entered secondary school, he continued to enjoy dissecting animals and began to explore his abuse. During this time, he kissed a boy from the neighborhood, which led him to realize that he was attracted to boys. Although he struggled to accept this part of himself, Jeffrey faced increasing anxiety due to his father Lionel's homophobic views. Throughout high school, he endured bullying. To cope with the challenges around him, he turned to alcohol. This dependence on alcohol led him to come to school drunk and even drink during class. As a result, he was often reprimanded and disciplined. His behavior varied greatly. Sometimes he was the center of attention, while at other times he was very shy in school. Jeffrey often engaged in behavior that was considered humorous or eccentric. He acted as the class clown, frequently imitating epileptic seizures and making sheep noises during class. As he grew older, he even began drawing chalk sketches of human bodies on the classroom floor. Around the age of 14 or 15, Jeffrey began to experience disturbing obsessive thoughts related to sex. This struggle intensified over time, leading him to develop various fantasies. However, unlike typical teenage fantasies, Jeffrey's were more disturbing. Jeffrey found his senior year of high school particularly challenging. Because his parents decided to get a divorce, Lionel moved away and took refuge in a hotel, while Jeffrey's mother also decided to leave home, taking her youngest son, David, with her and leaving Jeffrey alone. Just a few weeks after graduating, he began to explore his fantasies more freely. Jeffrey's fantasies began to take shape in a disturbing way. He often thought about a young man he had met while playing sports on his way home. This man frequently jogged in the evenings, shirtless, and Jeffrey found himself drawn to him. Jeffrey then imagined a scenario where he would hide in the bushes, and when the man passed by, Jeffrey would attack him and take him home. However, on the day, Jeffrey decided to make this fantasy a reality. The young man did not show up for his usual jog. Another fantasy that Jeffrey cherished was picking up a hitchhiker and taking him home. In this scenario, they would share an intimate moment and eventually live together in harmony. This fantasy became a reality in 1978 when Jeffrey was driving down the road and spotted a young hitchhiker who fit his ideal type. Jeffrey stopped and offered the young man a ride in his car. The young man, eager to go to the summer music festival, accepted Jeffrey's invitation to have a beer at his house first. His name was Stephen Hicks, and he had just turned 18. They returned to Jeffrey's house together after drinking a few beers. Stephen asked Jeffrey to fulfill his promise to take him to the festival. Jeffrey hesitated, and an argument ensued. Eventually, Stephen decided to leave, which escalated the situation in a fit of rage. Jeffrey hit Stephen with a dumbbell, causing him to fall to the floor, unconscious. In a panic, Jeffrey strangled Stephen until he stopped breathing. Jeffrey then processed Stephen's body, placing it in 5 black trash bags. He loaded the bags into his car and drove off to find a place to dispose of them. Jeffrey began to drive erratically and out of his lane. The patrolman saw Jeffrey and asked him why he was driving like that. Jeffrey confided in the officer about his struggles with insomnia and his parents' recent divorce. Expressing feelings of hopelessness about his life, he remained polite and calm throughout the conversation. When the officer asked about the car, he explained that it was full of trash and that he was looking for a place to properly dispose of it. Jeffrey made a good impression on the officer, who asked him to return home. Jeffrey complied and returned to his house with the trash bags containing Stephen's body. He eventually hid the bags in the basement. The next day, he continued to process Stephen's body. Attempting to crush the bones, he then scattered them in various locations behind the house. In the days that followed, Jeffrey paid attention to newspapers and news reports, hoping to find any updates on the missing man. However, he found none. He had committed a serious crime, but it was still a secret. This prompted him to repeat his crime. A week after Jeffrey's mother, Joyce, left home, Lionel found his son living alone and increasingly anxious. He encouraged Jeffrey to find a job, but Jeffrey showed little interest. Instead, he spent his days drinking. To help, Lionel took him to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and arranged sessions with psychologists. Lionel encouraged Jeffrey to pursue his studies at Ohio University. Although Jeffrey did not outright refuse, he continued to drink and think about Stephen's murder. In the following months, he donated blood in exchange for money to buy alcohol. By the end of the semester, his academic difficulties led to his expulsion from the university. However, Lionel was determined and convinced Jeffrey to enlist. Believing that military discipline could have a positive impact on him, Jeffrey complied and successfully passed the selection process. His passion for medical care took him to San Antonio, Texas, where he trained to become a military medic. Allowing him to gain a deeper understanding of human anatomy, Jeffrey eventually found his passion in his work. After 6 months, he had changed dramatically. Military physical training not only improved his physique, but also made him more sociable. For the first time, Lionel witnessed his son smile, although not while on leave. After completing his training, Jeffrey was deployed to a base in Germany. Unfortunately, his struggles with alcohol were not resolved, and when the authorities learned of the problem, he was discharged from the military upon returning to the United States. Jeffrey chose to distance himself from his father instead of going home. He settled in Miami, where he rented a hotel room and found work at a diner. At first, his life seemed okay, but it quickly became unstable. Jeffrey drank more and soon found himself unable to afford a hotel room, forcing him to sleep on the beach. Realizing that he could not continue like this, he decided to ask his father for financial help. Lionel, understanding that giving his son money might cause him to drink more, Lionel bought Jeffrey a ticket home instead, determined not to give up. Lionel committed to helping his son find a better path forward. Lionel picked Jeffrey up from the airport. Jeffrey greeted him with a bright smile, which initially led Lionel to believe that his son was simply happy to see him. However, it soon became clear that Jeffrey had consumed a significant amount of alcohol before the flight. Faced with this reality, Lionel decided that the best course of action would be to send Jeffrey to live with his grandmother in Milwaukee during his time with her. Jeffrey matured considerably. He developed a deep respect for his grandmother, who, by many accounts, was the only person he felt truly close to. Jeffrey helped her with various chores around the house and even attended church with her during the first few weeks. Jeffrey began reading the Bible, which helped him alleviate some of his negative thoughts. However, he still struggled with his fantasies. One day, he stole a male mannequin from a clothing store and hid it in his closet. He saw the mannequin as the perfect companion because it never rejected him, made no demands, and inspired him. However, one day, his grandmother discovered the mannequin and was horrified. She insisted that Jeffrey leave the house, but he calmed her down by promising to get rid of it one day. While sitting in the library, a man approached Jeffrey and handed him a note instructing him to meet in the men's room. Although Jeffrey chose not to accept the invitation, the incident sparked something within him, and after 9 years, his repressed desires resurfaced. In 1985, Jeffrey frequented the sauna, looking for men to satisfy his desires. When he found someone who interested him, he would invite them out for a drink. However, he would secretly put sleeping pills in their drinks. When the victim passed out, Jeffrey would lie down next to them. After one of his victims was poisoned and hospitalized, Jeffrey was banned from the club he frequented. Despite this, he continued to seek abuse partners in other bars and clubs. He preferred muscular young men and did not care about their skin color or hair color. In November 1987, Jeffrey met a man named Stephen Tuomi, a dancer and waiter from Michigan. They fell in love and decided to spend some time alone together. They rented a room at the Ambassador Hotel in Milwaukee, where Jeffrey offered Stephen a cocktail that had been spiked with sleeping pills. When Jeffrey woke up the next morning, he found bruises on Stephen Tuomi's forearms and chest, along with blood coming from his mouth. Jeffrey did not remember killing Stephen and could not believe it had happened. However, he was in the same room as the corpse, which prompted him to quickly leave the hotel, cross the street, and buy a suitcase. He returned to the hotel, placed Stephen's body in the suitcase, paid the bill in the lobby, and called a taxi. A hotel employee helped Jeffrey carry the suitcase, which was so heavy that the employee jokingly asked if there was a body inside. Jeffrey replied, "Yes," and they both laughed. Unaware that the employee was helping to dispose of a body, Jeffrey then went to his grandmother's house with the suitcase and secretly took it to the basement. He began to process Stephen Tuomi's body. He placed it in trash bags and then moved the bags containing the body into the trash. Several months later, Stephen Tuomi's relatives filed a missing persons report after he was last seen the night he met Jeffrey while working as a waiter. Although police initially believed that Stephen had simply left, his family did not accept this explanation. They had been unable to contact him, and his belongings were still in his house. However, the investigation stalled, and there was no explanation for Stephen Tuomi's disappearance. After not being held accountable for his actions, Jeffrey increasingly embraced his dark desires and became a serial killer. Over the next 5 years, he committed multiple murders on his free nights and weekends. After 3 months of searching for new victims, Jeffrey met a 14-year-old boy at a bus stop near a club. Jeffrey approached the boy and offered to pay him $50 to sleep with him, and unfortunately, the boy accepted the offer. They took the bus to Jeffrey's grandmother's house, where she was sleeping. While they went down to the basement, there, Jeffrey drugged the boy and then strangled him. He became more perverted, abusing the boy while he was dead. As the body began to decompose, Jeffrey treated it like those of his previous victims. He began to dispose of the body of James Dox Tater. He packed the body in plastic bags and threw it in the trash. The victim's name was James Dox Tater, according to the Tampa Bay Times. James had run away from home 2 days earlier to escape his abusive stepfather, although his mother filed a complaint. Police showed little interest in finding him. Jeffrey's fourth victim was Richard Guerrero, a 22-year-old Hispanic man. They met outside a gay bar called Phoenix. Jeffrey lured Richard to his grandmother's house, promising to pay him to spend the night in the basement. Jeffrey drugged Richard with sleeping pills, then strangled him with a leather strap and began abusing him after he was dead. After satisfying his desires, Jeffrey put the body parts in garbage bags, which were picked up by a garbage service the next day. Richard's family urged the police to investigate his disappearance, but the officers believed he had left home voluntarily. However, Richard's sister believed otherwise and convinced her relatives to hire a private investigator. Richard's father, who worked at a golf course, spent all his savings on the investigator. But it turned out that the investigator was a fraud. Meanwhile, Richard's mother prayed daily for his safe return. Jeffrey's grandmother asked him to move out because she was fed up with him. He was no longer the grandson she used to go to church with. His drinking, his habit of bringing young men to her house late at night, and the stench from the basement and garage were too much for her to bear. As a result, Jeffrey had to find a new place to live. He rented a small apartment, where he stayed for a while as he prepared for his next victim. Jeffrey then found his fifth potential victim, a 13-year-old boy who came to his apartment. They met on the street, where Jeffrey offered to pay the boy in exchange for allowing him to take pictures. However, when Jeffrey tried to touch the boy got scared and ran away. The 13-year-old then informed his parents about the incident, and they reported it to the police. As a result, Jeffrey was arrested and charged with harassment. He received a 1-year sentence at the Milwaukee Correctional Center. Although he was allowed to leave during the day to go to work, he was required to return to the facility at night, just days before his sentence began. Jeffrey met his sixth victim, a 24-year-old man named Anthony Sears. On March 25, 1989, Jeffrey and Anthony met at a bar, and when the bar closed, they decided to spend the night together. They could not go to Anthony's house because his girlfriend was there. Jeffrey asked a friend to drive them to his grandmother's house when they arrived. He took Anthony to the basement and committed his usual act. However, this time was different. After disposing of the body, he put it in several different garbage bags. Some of Anthony's remains he threw in the trash, while others he kept in his locker at work. During Jeffrey's trial, his lawyer successfully reduced his sentence to just 10 months in a rehabilitation center. Jeffrey's father wrote to the judge, asking that Jeffrey be allowed to attend an alcohol treatment program while incarcerated. However, the judge received the letter too late, and Jeffrey was released without undergoing any rehabilitation. After his release, Jeffrey upgraded the security in his apartment by installing cameras and an alarm system. On June 24, 1990, Jeffrey went on a killing spree while at one of his favorite bars. He noticed a man named Raymond Smith. Jeffrey drugged Raymond and abused him before killing him. Just a month after killing Raymond, Jeffrey targeted another victim, 27-year-old Edward Smith. Edward was lured in with an offer of $100 to have his picture taken. With Jeffrey pretending to be a photographer, Edward was last seen alive talking to Jeffrey at a club. In September 1990, Jeffrey murdered his eighth victim, 22-year-old Ernest Miller. Ernest was attractive and healthy, and he worked as a dancer. He agreed to pose for photos in Jeffrey's apartment for $50, which put him in a dangerous situation. Jeffrey followed his usual pattern, plied Ernest with a mixture of alcohol and strong drugs. And this time, however, Ernest woke up before Jeffrey could strangle him. Resulting in a struggle, Jeffrey attacked Ernest with a knife. After killing him, Jeffrey disposed of the body as he had done with his other victims. But this time, he took a more disturbing step. Not only did he handling of the body, he also put it in the freezer for later use. The foul smell emanating from Jeffrey's apartment caused complaints from neighbors. To explain the smell, Jeffrey claimed that his meat refrigerator had broken down. To solve the problem, he bought a large plastic barrel and filled it with acid to destroy the body parts. Although he was able to remove some of the evidence, the smell remained. It seemed that Jeffrey did not care about the complaints from the neighbors. On September 24, 1990, Jeffrey continued his killing spree, targeting David Thomas, a 22-year-old man whom he had met at the Grand Avenue Mall. Jeffrey convinced David to return to his apartment for a few drinks, offering additional money if he posed for a photo. After giving David a drink laced with sedatives, Jeffrey found himself not attracted to him, but was afraid David would be angry when he found out he was drugged. As a result, Jeffrey strangled him. He took photos of handling of the body disposal and kept those photos for unknown reasons. Jeffrey stopped killing for 4 months. He met his next victim in February 1991. This victim, his 10th, was 17-year-old Curtis Straughter. Curtis had just lost his job as a nurse and was looking forward to becoming a model and attending college. They met at a bus stop, tragically. This was not the end of Jeffrey's list of victims. Just 2 months later, he met Errol Lindsay, a 19-year-old boy who was also lured by the promise of money to take pictures. The next victim was 31-year-old Tony Hughes. Tony, who had lost his hearing as a child due to medication, was cheerful and sociable. He loved to dance and made friends easily. Tony was last seen on May 24, 1991, at a club. That night, Jeffrey invited him to his house, where he continued his killing spree. Unfortunately, Tony's body was left in Jeffrey's apartment for several days before being dumped in a dumpster on May 26, 1991. A tragic chapter unfolded when Jeffrey met Konarak Synthesomphone, a 14-year-old Laotian teenager. Konarak was the younger brother of a previous victim who had escaped from Jeffrey. The situation was heartbreaking. Konarak had accepted money from Jeffrey to help his family, who was struggling financially and faced challenges due to their limited English skills. Konarak had been drugged by Jeffrey. After ensuring that Konarak was unconscious, Jeffrey left to buy alcohol, planning to strangle him upon his return. However, Konarak regained consciousness and escaped from the apartment. He wandered the streets until he encountered 2 girls, who were the nieces of Jeffrey Dahmer's next-door neighbor. The girls saw Konarak, who was injured, and they called 911 for help. The police, along with paramedics, rushed to the scene. When they arrived, they found Konarak lying in the middle of the road. They picked him up and placed him in a nearby building. When they began asking him questions, Jeffrey turned around, claiming that Konarak was his boyfriend, with whom he had just had a fight, and that he had been drinking heavily. The police accepted Jeffrey's explanation. The 2 girls begged the police to check Jeffrey's identification, but they refused. They urged the officers to listen to them. Pointing out the bruises and cuts on Konarak's body, the girls insisted that they knew the boy and that he was definitely a minor. The officers rudely told the girls to be quiet and even threatened to arrest them for trying to help Konarak. Had the officers checked Jeffrey's identification, they would have discovered that he was on mandatory parole for a previous conviction for molesting Konarak's brother. Instead, both officers assisted Jeffrey in taking Konarak back to his apartment, and one officer even placed him on the sofa. Once inside the apartment, the officers detected a foul odor, which Jeffrey explained was from a broken refrigerator filled with rotting meat that he had not disposed of. Surprisingly, the officers did not find anything suspicious. Jeffrey even showed them pictures of Konarak that he had taken earlier. Another alarming detail that the police overlooked was the body of Tony Hughes in the bedroom. The police left the scene, but the 2 girls called them back to check if they needed to identify themselves as witnesses. Unfortunately, the police dismissed their concerns, claiming it was just a disagreement between 2 adult partners. When Jeffrey was left alone with Konarak, he decided to inject hydrochloric acid into the boy's head. He did this to create a zombie. He had always dreamed of having a companion who would obey his every command without question. These experiments ultimately led to Konarak's death. Jeffrey then handling of the body. Konarak's, the next victim added to Jeffrey's list, was 20-year-old Matt Turner, whom he met at a bus stop. Matt accepted Jeffrey's offer to travel to Milwaukee for a professional photo shoot at his apartment. Jeffrey drugged, strangled, and handling of the body Matt's. On July 5, 23-year-old Jeremiah Weinberger became Jeffrey's victim. They met at a bar in Chicago, and Jeremiah went to Jeffrey's apartment with the promise of spending the weekend with him. Jeffrey then drugged Jeremiah and injected boiling water into his skull twice, causing him to fall into a coma and die 2 days later. Oliver Lacey, a 23-year-old athlete, accepted an offer for a photo shoot for money and accompanied Jeffrey to his apartment there. Lacey and Jeffrey engage in intimate activities. Just 4 days later, on July 19, Jeffrey lured 25-year-old Joseph Bradehoff to his apartment. Joseph was strangled and laid out on Jeffrey's bed, covered with a sheet. For 2 days, on July 21, Jeffrey began handling of the body Joseph's. On July 22, 1991, Jeffrey approached a group of 3 friends at a bar while they were drinking. He introduced himself as a photographer and paid $100 to anyone to pose for photos. Only one, a 32-year-old homeless man named Tracy Edwards, agreed. Jeffrey invited Tracy to his apartment and mixed him a cocktail, which he offered to all of his victims. However, Tracy, being as smart as he was, noticed a strange taste in the drink and decided not to finish it. Jeffrey then attempted to be intimate with Tracy, but Tracy repeatedly refused. Eventually, Jeffrey handcuffed one of Tracy's hands, leading to a struggle. During the fight, Jeffrey grabbed a knife, but Tracy fought back, hit Jeffrey, and escaped from the apartment. On the street, Tracy spotted a police car and informed the officers about the incident. They accompanied him to Jeffrey's apartment. Jeffrey tried to prevent the police from searching his place, but it was extremely dirty, and a strong stench filled the air. While going through boxes in Jeffrey's apartment, the police discovered gruesome photos of his victims. It was clear that they were dealing with a serial killer. This was the beginning of the end for Jeffrey Dahmer. The police searched the apartment and arrested Jeffrey. Inside the refrigerator, they discovered numerous human body parts. In a container filled with acid, they found more human body parts. They also found photographs that not only revealed the bodies of the victims, but also documented the many abuses Jeffrey had committed against them. Jeffrey felt relieved that he no longer had to hide such a secret that he had kept for so many years. When he realized that he would have to face the consequences of his actions, he chose to confess everything. His confession took 6 weeks to complete and spanned 159 pages, detailing every aspect of his crimes, from his first murder to his last victim. Jeffrey explained that at first, he just wanted to lie next to the men he had kidnapped. But over time, his desires became increasingly horrific. He admitted that the only way to keep his victims with him forever was to kill them. Jeffrey Dahmer claimed that he did not want to kill. Instead, he wanted a zombie-like companion that he could control indefinitely. Psychologists who worked with Jeffrey concluded that his motive was not abuse, but a desire for control. After Jeffrey's detailed confession, the court no longer had to prove his guilt. It only needed to determine his sanity. At the time, Wisconsin did not have the death penalty. If he were found insane, he would have been committed to a mental hospital indefinitely. Although there was a possibility that he could be released in the future, the trial began on January 30, 1992, due to the serious nature of the case. Many security measures were taken in the courtroom, including the installation of bulletproof glass throughout the 2-week trial. Jeffrey sat silently, listening to arguments from both the prosecution and the defense. Jeffrey's defense strategy was simple. They did not try to argue that he was not guilty of murder. Instead, the defense sought to have him hospitalized for treatment. They argued that he needed psychological and psychiatric help, asserting that normal people do not commit such heinous acts. The prosecution, in contrast, argued that, under Wisconsin law, a person who remembers his actions and understands what they have done should be considered sane. A few days later, a verdict was reached. Jeffrey Dahmer was sentenced to 15 consecutive life sentences, plus an additional life sentence for a 1978 murder, bringing the total to 16 life sentences. Jeffrey expressed deep remorse for the pain he had caused the families of his victims and acknowledged their anger toward him. He was then sent to a maximum security prison in Wisconsin. During his time in prison, Jeffrey rediscovered his faith in God. Recalling the times he had gone to church with his grandmother, he asked a local priest to baptize him, and the priest agreed. On July 3, 1994, a fellow inmate, Osvaldo Durruti, attacked Jeffrey, who was hospitalized but survived then. In November of that year, another inmate, Christopher Scarver, who was also serving a life sentence, attacked him. Christopher had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Christopher disliked Jeffrey, who described himself as religious, a characterization that Christopher found insincere. In November, Christopher, Jeffrey, and another inmate, Jesse Anderson, who was serving time for murdering his wife, cleaned the inmate gym. They were also required to clean the locker room and restrooms used after gym class when they were left unsupervised. Christopher seized the opportunity to carry out his dangerous plan to attack both Jeffrey and Jesse. First, he followed Jeffrey into the locker room. Where Jeffrey was cleaning, he took a steel bar from the weight room and struck Jeffrey in the head several times. He then attacked Jesse in the same manner. Afterward, he left the gym and called security. Both Jeffrey and Jesse were taken to the hospital, but Jeffrey died en route. His death was confirmed upon arrival at the hospital. Jesse remained in a coma for 2 days before being taken off life support. In accordance with Jeffrey's wishes, his body was cremated, and his ashes were divided among his parents. When details of Jeffrey's crimes became public, protests erupted, focused on the fact that 2 police officers who handed over a boy named Konarak Synthesomphone to Jeffrey were not prosecuted. The 2 police officers did not check the identity of the boy or Jeffrey and did not search Jeffrey's apartment. After the trial, the 2 police officers involved were suspended from duty. They later appealed the dismissal, and the judge ruled in their favor, and awarding each $55 in compensation after being reinstated. Both officers resumed their careers. Additionally, after the investigation was completed, the building where Jeffrey Dahmer lived was demolished in the hope of helping people forget the horrific events that occurred there. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we'll be diving into a new case, the case of Alcácer girls. This story takes us to a small town called Alcácer, located in Valencia, Spain, with a population of only about 7 people. In the 1990s, it became the center of a horrific case involving 3 high school girls. On November 13, 1992, 4 friends, Antonia Rodriguez, Desiree Hernandez, Miriam Garcia, and another girl made plans to meet after school. Their day started like any other. They attended school and looked forward to spending the evening together. When Miriam arrived at school, she expected her father, Fernando Garcia, to pick her up after classes later. Fernando recalled driving her home in his car. During the ride, Miriam talked about her day, the grades she had received, and her dreams for the future. She was especially excited because she was planning to attend a party with her friends that evening. Fernando was sick with the flu, stayed in bed after bringing Miriam home. The party was scheduled to be held at a club called Cooler in the nearby town of Picassent. The girls planned to meet at the remaining friend's house at around 7 p.m. However, the friend wasn't feeling well and decided not to join them. The other 3 girls were determined to go ahead with their plans. By the time they were ready to leave, it was too late to rely on public transportation, so they couldn't find a bus to take them to the club. Miriam decided to call her father for help, but he was asleep instead. Her mother answered the phone. Miriam persistently asked her mother to have her father drive them to the neighboring town, but her mother refused. She believed it was a bad idea and potentially unsafe, and she also wanted her husband to rest. Miriam's mother insisted that the girls return home because it was already late. Miriam, however, asked if she could stay overnight at a friend's house, suspecting this was just an excuse. Her mother firmly insisted that Miriam come home. Reluctantly, Miriam agreed and promised to be back by curfew. Despite this, the girls were determined not to give up on their plans. They decided to find their own way to the club. At 8 p.m., the 3 friends began walking toward the club. For these young teenagers, this felt like an important night. It was their first time attending such a party. They had all promised their parents they would return on time as the night went on. Keeping that promise turned out to be much harder than they expected. Miriam was about 30 minutes late returning home, and her mother grew increasingly worried. Panic set in. However, in the early 1990s, the girls did not have cell phones, making contact with them impossible. The uncertainty was overwhelming for the parents. Miriam's mother tried to reassure herself, thinking that perhaps Miriam had been upset, gone to a friend's house, or was avoiding coming home to prevent an argument. Though this explanation felt overly optimistic, it gave her a brief sense of calm. She began calling the parents of all the friends Miriam had planned to meet that day. To her dismay, none of the girls were at home. The other parents were just as alarmed and immediately began searching for clues about where the girls might be. No one had any idea when or where the teenagers had disappeared. The last time Miriam's mother had spoken to her, Miriam was leaving a friend's house. It seemed unlikely that the girls could have gone far, as they had no money and had left all their belongings at home. The parents speculated that the girls might have gotten lost while trying to find transportation. Fernando decided to go to Picasso to look for his daughter, though deeply worried. Miriam's father tried to reassure himself, believing that his daughter had always been a quiet, responsible girl who avoided trouble and bad influences. He hoped to find her near the club and bring her and her friends back home. Unfortunately, when he arrived, there was no sign of the missing girls. Witnesses at the club could not recall seeing anyone matching their descriptions. Fernando relayed this information to her mother, and the family quickly decided to contact the police. However, the police showed little urgency. They assumed the girls had simply stayed out late at the party, wandered into another club, had too much to drink, or spent the night with friends, and would likely return home soon. The authorities informed that they had to wait at least 24 hours before officially filing a missing persons report. The officers suggested that the teenagers might have a habit of sneaking out, but the parents firmly denied this. All the missing girls were between 14 and 15 years old. Miriam had left all her belongings in her room, clearly intending to return later that night. As she had promised her mother, similar patterns were observed in the other girls' cases. One of them had hastily packed a sports bag with items needed for practice the next day and had assured her parents she would come back early to rest. This behavior was entirely out of character for the girls, which left their families deeply concerned. Despite this, law enforcement remained resolute in their belief that no foul play was involved. Crime rates in the area were very low, making it difficult for anyone to believe the disappearances could be connected to criminal activity. When news of the case became public, everything changed. People in the small town, where most residents knew each other, were deeply shocked and assist in the search. Despite 24 hours passing without any progress from the police, the girls' whereabouts remained unknown. Volunteers formed groups to look for the girls and distributed leaflets with their descriptions. Throughout the town, Miriam's family was especially proactive. Working closely with the police and witnesses, the last person who saw the girls was their friend, who had fallen ill and stayed home instead of going to the party. She explained that the group had no access to transportation, no one to give them a ride, and no money. They had planned to hitchhike if necessary, an idea she strongly opposed. Considering it too dangerous, she tried to dissuade her friends, but feared they might go through with it anyway. Investigators questioned other young people who attended the party, but none of them remembered seeing the missing girls that night. This prompted the police to focus on the shortest route the girls would have taken to reach the party. A classmate of one of the girls stated that on Friday evening, as he was heading home after his final exams, he saw the girls in the city center. They were walking in the opposite direction of the club. When he asked if they were going to the party, they said no. He couldn't remember the exact time, but guessed they were likely heading to their friend's house. Another witness, an older acquaintance, reported seeing the girls a few blocks from their friend's house. He was driving through the area with his girlfriend when he noticed them. Although he didn't know the girls well, He offered them a ride. Antonia, Miriam, and Desiree told him they were heading to the nightclub Cooler. Then his car broke down. So he dropped the girls off near an auto repair shop near the nightclub. From there, they likely continued on foot. The area where they were dropped off was near some fields. There were a few buildings around, so the area wasn't entirely deserted. Someone might have seen the girls, and there was hope of identifying another key witness. Shortly after, a witness came forward. A woman testified that she saw girls matching the description walking past her house. She mentioned noticing a white car with 3 or 4 men inside that stopped near the group. After briefly speaking with the driver, the girls got into the car. However, she couldn't remember the car's make or license plate. Her testimony raised several questions, considering the number of people already in the car. It wasn't clear how the girls could fit into a typical white sedan if there were already 4 occupants. The search effort reached a standstill, and it appeared the police's interest in the case was waning. Just a few days after the rescue operation started, the girls' parents began to fear the case would be abandoned entirely. Faced with this situation, Miriam's parents intensified their efforts to gather community support. They handed out flyers and spread the word through radio, television, and newspapers. By this time, Fernando had put in significantly more effort than law enforcement, however. His dedication sparked mixed reactions. Some accused him of seeking attention or fame amidst the turmoil of his daughter's disappearance. Despite this, he successfully brought national attention to the case and pressured the police to take more decisive action. A month and a half had passed since the girls disappeared, and for the 3 families from Alcácer, New Year's Eve was approaching, a holiday they would have to endure without their daughters. There had been no updates about the girls, and it seemed as though the police had completely stopped the investigation. The parents were trapped in an unimaginable state of anguish and uncertainty. On January 27, about 40 kilometers from where the girls lived, 2 beekeepers went to check on their hives in a remote, rugged area near La Romana. The location was difficult to reach unless someone was already familiar with it. While there, they noticed something unusual, a faint glimmer of light coming from the underbrush. As they approached, they found a patch of disturbed soil with something protruding from it. Upon closer inspection, they realized it was a hand emerging from the loose earth. The hand wore a wristwatch, which had reflected the sunlight and caught their attention. The police were immediately notified of the discovery. Later that day, during an excavation at the site, the bodies of the missing schoolgirls were discovered. All 3 were buried together in a shallow grave, bound with ropes, wrapped in a carpet, and covered with dirt. Shortly afterward, an investigation team was assembled, but its members were inexperienced and unfamiliar with handling such cases. This lack of expertise led to several critical mistakes. The burial site was neither photographed nor properly examined, and it wasn't secured until hours after the police arrived. As a result, crucial evidence may have been trampled, overlooked, or entirely lost. Afterward, authorities concentrated their search on the area surrounding the grave. Among the findings were personal belongings of the beekeepers and several small, isolated cabins. In one of these cabins, a piece of jewelry resembling an earring worn by one of the girls was discovered. Since the bodies were found on the beekeepers' property, their homes were searched thoroughly. Police suspected that these locations might contain items related to the victims. However, initial searches did not turn up anything. The medical examiner identified numerous signs of torture on the bodies of all 3 victims. The girls had suffered horrific deaths. 2 of them, Antonia and Desiree, were found decapitated, while Miriam's body was missing her right hand, which was never recovered. Although bullet wounds were determined to be the cause of death, the bodies also showed multiple stab wounds and evidence of severe beatings. Some of the victims had teeth knocked out. It was clear they had been held captive for an extended period. Bound, subjected to starvation and dehydration, each girl endured brutal abuse and torture over several days, with some abuse continuing even after death. At the burial site, Numerous DNA traces were discovered on the carpet, but the forensic technology of the early 1990s was too limited to fully analyze the evidence in and around the grave. Investigators found various unrelated items, fragments of clothing, rope, hairs, bone fragments, scraps of paper, and other debris at the time of the discovery. Fernando was in London, working to raise international awareness about the girl's disappearance. He had planned a press conference the following day to continue the search for the missing schoolgirls. Despite everything, he remained hopeful that the girls might still be found alive. The news of their bodies being discovered was devastating. He immediately boarded the first flight home to be with his family during this tragic time. The extensive media coverage of these events had unintended and troubling consequences for those directly involved when the police informed the families about the girls' deaths. The moment was broadcast live on television. What should have been a private, painful moment was turned into a public spectacle, resembling reality TV. While search efforts were still ongoing, the police quickly identified potential suspects at the burial site. They found fragments of paper that turned out to be part of a patient record from a nearby hospital. This clue led them to a small house near the location where the girls' bodies were discovered. Inside the house, they found an earring, which became a key piece of evidence in the investigation. The suspect was Antonio, who had access to the house and a prior criminal record. However, the authorities could not apprehend Antonio, as he had disappeared, seemingly fleeing, which added to suspicions about his involvement. Forensic analysis determined that more than one person had attacked the girls. Investigators then turned their attention to Antonio's social circle, including his friend Miguel Ricard. Miguel was initially shocked to be under suspicion. Investigators noted that Miguel owned a white Opel Corsa car, and as mentioned earlier, a witness had stated she saw a white car stop next to the girls on the night of their disappearance. During his initial interrogation, Miguel stated that he hadn't seen Antonio in a long time, although they had been friends for years. Miguel said he didn't know Antonio's current whereabouts. He acknowledged that Antonio had psychological issues that could make him dangerous. Investigators suspected that Miguel's statements were an attempt to deflecting attention. Authorities accused Miguel of lying about his location during the girl's disappearance, suspecting he was trying to create a false alibi by claiming he was in prison at the time. Further investigation revealed that Miguel had only been jailed a few weeks after the murders. It remains unclear whether Miguel was genuinely mistaken or deliberately lying. Miguel grew up in a difficult household. His mother died when he was 3 years old, and he was raised by an abusive father. This upbringing led him to experiment with alcohol and banned substance. At 16, Miguel dropped out of school to support himself and began working. He spent some time working on a farm and later, at the age of 20, became a used car salesman. He lived with a girlfriend for several years, and when she became pregnant with their daughter, Miguel joined the Spanish army. After leaving the army, he returned home. At this time, he exhibited domestic violence, which put a strain on his relationship with his girlfriend. They eventually separated, and Miguel moved in with his close friend Antonio. Miguel and Antonio began committing crimes such as theft and stealing cars, which attracted police attention. Although Miguel had no history of violent behavior, Antonio's troubled past raised suspicions. Antonio was born in 1966 in Brazil to a large family that later moved to Spain from a young age. He exhibited a volatile and aggressive temperament, often causing trouble in school and instigating fights. His behavior worsened during his teenage years, as he frequently skipped school and was rumored to carry a weapon. Eventually, Antonio became involved in criminal activities, forming a gang that targeted vulnerable men. The gang would lure their victims to isolated locations under false pretenses, rob them, and blackmail them for extended periods. During this time, Antonio developed addictions to alcohol and banned substance. Eventually, he becoming involved in banned substance distribution. His sadistic and abusive behavior also extended to his own family, leading them to report him to the police. His mother even obtained a restraining order to protect herself from his aggression. Antonio was eventually convicted of crimes related to banned substance dealing and violence against, receiving a 9-year prison sentence at the time of the murders of 3 schoolgirls. Antonio was on weekend leave from prison due to good behavior. After the murders, Antonio fled. During multiple interrogations, detectives obtained a confession from Miguel, seemingly solving the case. However, Miguel later repeatedly denied the confession, claiming it had been made under pressure and coercion. The guilt of both Antonio and Miguel still needed to be definitively proven. This disagreement caused tensions even among the victims' families. Meanwhile, the case unfolded under intense media scrutiny, gradually becoming a pivotal moment in Spain's legal history from the beginning. Police actions raised serious questions and sparked controversy. Miguel's confession lacked consistency, with his testimony changing each time. Additionally, the detectives' records appeared fragmented, leading many of Miguel's supporters to believe that investigators had manipulated him to obtain the answers they wanted. According to the official prosecution narrative, Miguel and Antonio met on the specified date late that evening. They were driving a white car down a road when they encountered 3 schoolgirls walking toward a club. After stopping near the girls, the latter appeared to feel uneasy. Miguel confessed that Antonio instructed him to help seize the girls and forcefully drag them into the car. The two then drove to a secluded area where they assaulted and abused the victims. They decided to move to a more remote mountainous location near an apiary. There, in an isolated cabin, they continued to torture and abuse the girls for days. Miguel stated in his confession that he tried to persuade Antonio to stop, but claimed Antonio ignored him and coerced him into participating. Miguel asserted that he complied out of fear for his own life. The girls reportedly cried and begged for release, but Antonio struck one of them on the head with a rock to silence her. After a prolonged period of torture, the perpetrators murdered the girls. They wrapped the bodies in a carpet and buried them on the apiary grounds. Miguel later retracted his confessions after consulting a lawyer. When Fernando looked into these allegations, he discovered that many interrogations had been inadequately documented. Additionally, there were no audio or video recordings of Miguel's confessions, leaving investigators to rely solely on written reports. This raised suspicions that something was being hidden throughout the case. Miguel faced significant challenges, including going through 7 different defense attorneys, which caused major delays as the investigation and his detention lasted 4 years. Shortly before the trial, a new lawyer joined the case and had to review over 800 documents, including confessions and expert reports. During this time, advancements in forensic science enabled more detailed DNA analysis. Investigators had collected numerous samples of bodily fluids, hair, and blood during the investigation. However, they could not be fully analyzed with the forensic techniques available in the early 1990s. Now, updated methods made such investigation possible. Just 1 day before the trial, Fernando requested a delay to conduct additional analysis of this evidence. He contacted an independent forensic expert with experience in criminal cases. He quit his job and devoted his life entirely to the investigation, which took a heavy toll on his personal life. His marriage suffered greatly, and his wife later admitted that the tragedy had reduced their relationship to a mere shadow of what it once was. The tragedy also severely impacted Fernando's wife, whose health declined over the years. She battled cancer and ultimately refused a liver transplant, saying it should go to someone who truly wanted to live. By the time the trial began, she had passed away. The case of Alcácer girls undoubtedly became the most high-profile case in Spain's history. A heated confrontation unfolded as the prosecution's version of events was riddled with gaps and inconsistencies. Independent experts were unable to find any evidence linking Antonio or Miguel to the murders of the three schoolgirls. Their only connection to the case appeared to be a cabin near the area where the bodies were discovered, and a torn map located close to the burial site. But outside the pit, searches of the apiary cabin and the white car allegedly used by the men revealed no traces of the girls' torture or blood. Considering Miguel's confession, it seemed highly improbable that no physical evidence of the crimes could be found in the house or vehicle. Despite such doubts, the prosecution remained determined to secure a conviction. Meanwhile, Fernando launched his own investigation and unearthed evidence suggesting the involvement of high-ranking officials. Driven by the painful loss of his daughter, he tirelessly sought the truth, openly criticizing the entire investigative process and sparking widespread public debate. He even appeared on television, alleging that the crime might be linked to a criminal network responsible for orchestrating such activities. He accused several prominent figures in Spain, a move that drew significant public attention. However, these allegations came with consequences. Both Fernando and a criminologist assisting him faced legal repercussions for attempting to obstruct the ongoing investigation. Miguel's trial began in mid-1997. By that time, he had already spent 4 years behind bars. He was expected to receive a severe sentence for the crimes he was accused of, despite the lack of concrete evidence. Miguel was convicted of kidnapping, abuse, and murdering the 3 victims, and sentenced to 170 years in prison. In 2010, Miguel appealed to the European Court, which ruled in his favor, stating that the sentence constituted cruel punishment. The European Commission argued that indefinite prison terms could make inmates increasingly uncontrollable and violent toward other prisoners and staff. Miguel was later released in 2013, following a ruling by the Court of Justice of the European Union. As for Antonio, his whereabouts remain unknown. It was suspected that he had attempted to flee the country, although briefly detained in Ireland for traveling without a ticket. He disappeared shortly afterward. Some speculated that he allegedly jumped into the sea off the coast of Ireland to end life. Many believe he successfully escaped abroad, possibly returning to his native Brazil, as he held dual citizenship to this day. Antonio remains on fugitive lists as a prime suspect in the crimes committed against the 3 schoolgirls. The case's resolution and law enforcement's actions remain deeply controversial. Fernando continues to insist that the truth is far more complex than the prosecution has claimed. Samples taken from the carpet and the girl's hair couldn't be matched to any existing profiles in the database. The father believes that Antonio and Miguel likely didn't act alone. More people were likely involved in the crime. However, this truth may now never be revealed. Antonio, who could have helped uncover what really happened, was never found. A statue of the 3 girls was erected in the nearest cemetery where their bodies were buried. Just as in life, the girls remained together even after death. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sherry Daly. Sherry Daly grew up in Ventura, California, in a loving and supportive family, known for her friendly attitude and positive outlook. She quickly became one of the most popular girls in school. In her senior year, she began dating Michael Daly, who was admired by many. Their relationship developed quickly, and the couple even decided to get married after graduation. Despite their many positive qualities, Michael was outgoing and sociable, while Sherry was an introverted and reserved young woman who displayed a calm demeanor. In contrast to her boyfriend's lively personality, Michael's personality did not fit in with Sherry's family. However, despite their obvious differences, the couple found a harmonious balance in their relationship. Sherry became more outgoing in social situations, while Michael adopted a calmer approach. Initially, their relationship faced significant opposition from their families, but Sherry was determined to pursue it, and her parents eventually relented. Their doubts were dispelled, When Sherry and Michael introduced each other to their families, Michael gradually won over Sherry's relatives. And seeing Sherry's joy reassured her parents of his good intentions, he showed his charm and made a positive impression. Appearing both intelligent and trustworthy, Michael's serious demeanor charmed Sherry, and her family supported her choice. After graduating from high school, the young couple started their lives together, both working at a local grocery store. However, for Sherry, this was not her ultimate aspiration. She dreamed of saving enough money to open a daycare at home, a goal that aligned with her interest in children. The couple married in 1982 when Sherry was 21, and by the age of 24, she had welcomed 2 sons. Just a year apart, motherhood brought her joy, and her daily routine revolved around taking her sons to school and daycare. Sherry not only took her sons to school, but also cared for several children in the neighborhood, further expanding her nurturing role. Gradually, she was able to quit her grocery store job and devote herself to childcare full-time. This allowed her to fulfill one of her long-cherished dreams of caring for children in her own home. To accommodate her growing responsibilities, she purchased a van, affectionately known to her friends as the local school bus. It seemed like the family had everything they could wish for, and there were no signs of challenges to come. On May 6, 1996, Sherry was scheduled, as usual, to pick up the students and take them home. When her husband returned home, he began receiving calls from worried parents inquiring about Sherry's absence. They were confused, as she had not arrived to pick up the children after school. Michael soon received a call from the school, confirming that his 2 sons had not been picked up either. Prompted by the situation, Michael went to the school, where he learned that Sherry had only been there that morning. Concerned for her safety, he suspected that she might have been in an accident or had encountered some kind of emergency. He began contacting local hospitals, but there were no reports of injuries matching her description. Feeling the urgency of the situation, he then contacted Sherry's parents, who lived about 120 kilometers away. They also had no idea where she was. Therefore, they decided to notify the police and report Sherry missing. The officers went to the couple's home to conduct a routine investigation and quickly realized that something was wrong. They decided to interview the neighbors, but no one had seen Sherry since she had dropped her children off at school that morning. Sherry usually went to the store around 10 a.m. to do her shopping and then returned home to do her chores. However, on May 6th, this routine was interrupted. She did not return by noon. Concerns prompted them to check the route Sherry would typically take, which led the police to the parking lot where she usually parked. There, they discovered her truck, apparently abandoned in a hurry. With the keys still in the ignition, Sherry's identification was found attached to her keychain, and the Mother's Day gifts she had purchased were scattered across the floor of the car. The doors were unlocked, and there was no sign of Sherry inside. The police later attempted to contact Michael, but he was not home, which they found unusual given the circumstances. Sherry was missing. Yet Michael did not seem anxious to hear from her. Furthermore, they learned that Michael had begun selling items that belonged to Sherry, suggesting that he was not expecting her to return. The police reviewed security footage from both the outdoor parking lot and inside the store. The recordings confirmed that Sherry had gone shopping that morning. Consistent with her usual routine, there was no indication that she was in distress. She was not followed around the store, and no suspicious individuals were seen in the footage. It was evident that something went wrong after she loaded her groceries into her truck. Unfortunately, security cameras did not capture any footage of the parking lot after she approached her car at 9:22 a.m. as the officers discussed the events in the parking lot. A passerby overheard their conversation and approached them. She reported that she had seen a turquoise sedan pull up near Sherry's car earlier that morning. A blonde woman, wearing a brown suit and sunglasses, exited the vehicle after a brief conversation with this woman. The witness saw Sherry being handcuffed and taken away in an unknown direction. The woman who arrested her did not appear to be a police officer, and the vehicle's appearance was unusual. It is difficult to determine the circumstances of her encounter with an apparent plainclothes officer. Police quickly became concerned, noting that it was unusual for police to operate in the city without a marked vehicle or uniform while making an arrest. The entire situation raised alarm bells. One officer, who happened to have attended high school with Sherry, stated that he knew both Sherry and her husband Michael well, and asserted that Sherry did not seem like the type of person who would be so serious as to be handcuffed and taken away, especially since the young couple had no prior legal issues. The witness provided a valuable clue. The police quickly searched the databases of all police stations, hoping to find relevant information regarding Sherry's case. However, they found no such records, indicating that this was not an arrest but a kidnapping. The police initially focused their attention on Michael, but then he provided a credible alibi at the time of the kidnapping. He was working at a grocery store, and several employees confirmed that he was on duty. In addition, security footage was reviewed to further verify his whereabouts. During the initial stages of the interrogation, Michael revealed that he had been in a long-term relationship with a woman named Diana. Surprisingly, he mentioned that he did not know her last name. Michael also did not know her address, but the police were able to obtain a phone number associated with Diana at that time, when cell phones were not yet common. Michael provided his home phone number as a result. He was released after investigating the address associated with the phone number. The police discovered that Diana's full name was Diana Hahn. The address was verified in their database, prompting the police to plan a visit to her home. The police arrived at the house and knocked on the door, although they heard noises from inside. No one answered at first. After a while of waiting, Michael opened the door. Standing behind him was Diana. Michael's attitude aroused suspicion. He appeared indifferent to his wife's disappearance and seemed more concerned about his mistress. The police decided to take both of them to the station for questioning, as they suspected that the situation might be related to a love triangle. It is believed that Sherry may have discovered Michael's affair, which could have led to conflict, either between the couple or involving Diana. Diana had become an integral part of Michael's life. He brought his sons to her home on numerous occasions, allowing them to spend time together as a family. Witnesses stated that Sherry had known about the situation long before her disappearance and had frequent conflicts with both Michael and Diana. Many witnesses confirmed the hostility between Diana and Sherry. Despite this tension, Michael appeared indifferent, which exacerbated the rivalry between the two women. Sherry viewed Diana as a homewrecker and was determined to protect her marriage. She steadfastly refused to consider divorce, believing that their problems were merely a temporary crisis that would eventually resolve itself. Through discussions with Diana and Michael, as well as their relatives, it became clear that Sherry's family had been facing significant challenges for a long time. Observations of Michael's behavior indicated that he treated Sherry more like a servant than a partner. She would wake up at 2 a.m. to prepare meals for him, and even prepared hot water for him, ensuring he could enjoy a hot bath when he woke up. Sherry complied with many of his requests, but Michael constantly found reasons to criticize her. Sherry's family members knew that Michael was unhappy with Sherry's appearance after giving birth. She dedicated a lot of time and effort to getting back in shape, dieting, exercising, and experimenting with her hairstyles and makeup, all in an attempt to please him. Unfortunately, her efforts never seemed to be enough. As he often insulted her and blamed her, the family dynamic worsened when Michael was transferred to a store in Santa Barbara. His new work schedule, which included night shifts and daytime sleep, added to their stress. After a while, Michael was transferred back, where he met his lover, Diana. They discovered that they had a lot in common, leading to the rapid development of their romantic relationship. Both of their mothers were from Japan, and their fathers had served in the United States Army. Their colleagues knew about the relationship and generally had a negative view of Diana. Her mysterious nature and stern demeanor scared many people. In the months before Sherry's disappearance, Michael often told his wife about a friend named Alex. He said that Alex was struggling after a breakup and that he was being supportive, including visiting Alex overnight. However, the frequent calls to their home were not from Alex, but from Diana, who disguised her voice to sound like a man. It was clear that Michael made no effort to hide his relationship. In fact, he seemed to flaunt it, which easily hurt Sherry and made her worry about his feelings for her. A neighbor recalled that last Christmas, Sherry came to his house in tears. She was alone, knowing that Michael had taken their sons to spend the holidays with Diana, feeling betrayed. Sherry sought comfort from her neighbor. Despite her pain, she had not yet considered divorce. She still hoped to save their relationship and believed she could work things out. However, as her mother later recounted, Sherry had decided to leave Michael and take the children before she went missing. She had no intention of seeking child support, believing she could handle her challenges on her own. The interrogation of Michael and Diana ended with a crucial question. Where was Diana the day Sherry went missing? She claimed to have taken the day off work to go for a long bike ride outside the city. However, her alibi appeared to be weak, as there was no testimony or video evidence to corroborate her story. A call to the police station from a co-worker at Michael's grocery store raised further concerns. The co-worker noted that Diana was an hour late for her shift the day after Sherry went missing. During questioning, Diana had several scratches on her forehead, and her hair almost covered her face. When asked to push her hair aside, it became clear that she was hiding several scratches, which she claimed were from a bicycle accident. However, these looked more like fingernail scratches than the usual injuries from a fall. When the police asked to see her palms, elbows, and knees, areas that are often injured in bicycle accidents, Diana's skin showed no scratches, suggesting that her claim of having fallen off a bicycle was a lie. Despite these contradictions, she stuck to her story. Michael's behavior was equally disturbing. He showed no concern about his wife's disappearance. He did not participate in search efforts and did not attempt to join any groups. He explained that he needed to care for their children during this difficult time. However, this excuse did not seem sincere, especially when he tried to spend time with his mistress, Diana. While leaving the children with his parents, the police are working to gather evidence to charge the suspects. Previously, a witness mentioned that the undercover cop was driving a turquoise car, but she could not remember the license plate number. The police believe that the perpetrators were unlikely to have used their own vehicles and suspect that the car the perpetrator was driving was rented. Therefore, they decided to check local car rental companies. Their investigation revealed that a turquoise Nissan Altima had indeed been rented on the day of Sherry's incident. The police aimed to impound the car for inspection, but it was at a car wash, although the rental company did not require a thorough cleaning of the interior after each return. The Nissan was in worse condition than usual. Employees reported that the interior was in disarray. The back seat was stained, and the side mirrors were torn. At the direction of management, the car was sent for cleaning. After the car was returned, the police inspected the interior. Surprisingly, much of the evidence remained intact, despite the cleaning. When they lifted the rear carpet, they discovered a large stain underneath that looked like dried blood. Consequently, the decision was made to seize the car for forensic examination. During the inspection, bloodstains were found in the trunk and on the seats when they cut the upholstery. The foam material of the rear seats was soaked with evidence, and the bloodstains in the car were sent for analysis. The results later confirmed that the blood belonged to Sherry. Additionally, it was determined that Diana was the person who rented the car. Therefore, the police decided to interrogate Diana again. During this interview, Diana maintained her innocence, sticking to her previously fabricated story during the search. The police found a handbag belonging to Diana, which contained a remarkable photograph. This photo was a professional studio picture of Sherry's family, capturing a family gathering with their children. However, two important details stood out. Diana appeared in the photo next to Sherry. As the police unraveled the complexities of the family's relationships, they began to uncover Diana's many intrigues. In Diana's handbag, a piece of paper was found with Sherry's name and her bank account number. Further investigation revealed that Diana had studied and practiced witchcraft. Diana had confided to a colleague about her intention to sacrificial someone on Michael's birthday, which raised significant concerns. Michael's birthday was only a few days after Sherry's murder, making these developments even more suspicious. In this context, Diana expressed a desire to speak to Michael. In response, the police organized a discreet meeting. They agreed to let Michael into the interrogation room. Their conversation was being recorded, and they did not seem to know it. They spoke in a very relaxed manner. The police could clearly hear their discussion, which provided valuable insights into the case. Diana expressed her frustration with Michael, accusing him of putting her in a dangerous situation that could have led to her arrest. She repeatedly questioned him about why he had placed her in these circumstances. The couple was clearly looking for a way out of this complicated situation and was trying to find a means to avoid punishment. Michael then made vague statements and urged Diana to tell the truth to the police, stressing that she had nothing to worry about. They attempted to stage a misleading conversation to distract the police. They had no idea that important information had reached police. Michael was then escorted out of the interrogation room, and the discussion continued with Diana, who was pressed to explain her possession of a piece of paper with the bank account number. In her defense, Diana claimed that Sherry had abandoned the children and that the account was necessary to purchase necessities for them. However, her explanation lacked credibility. The police believed that Diana was lying. After investigations, they learned that Sherry was a good woman. Many of her acquaintances described her as a loving mother to her children, and there was no sign of her mistreating them. It was clear that she was trusted to look after the children of her neighbors and other households, which reinforced the belief that she would not abandon her own children. Despite this, Diana continued to try to portray Sherry in a negative light. The police realized that Diana was involved in Sherry's case, but they felt they did not have enough evidence to arrest her or file charges. Therefore, they allowed her to go home while the investigation continued. The case was widely reported in the media, raising concerns that journalists could play a key role in assisting criminal investigations or obstructing the pursuit of justice. Sherry's disappearance was a popular topic on all news platforms, including newspapers, radio, and television. Her photos were displayed prominently throughout the city, prompting widespread public discussion. The police received numerous calls with tips related to the case. However, many of them were unfounded. Despite this, they focused on identifying credible leads based on the evidence they had. The police decided to share information with the public about a possible connection to someone named Diana as soon as her photo was aired. Calls to the station increased significantly. One notable tip came from a woman working at a local wig shop who recalled that Diana had purchased a chestnut wig a few weeks earlier. Diana made it clear that she intended to look like a police officer to intimidate someone. Further investigation revealed that she had paid for the wig with a check made out to Sherry. Signed in distinctive blue ink, a salesperson from another store contacted the police to report that Diana had visited his establishment around the same time. During this visit, Diana purchased handcuffs and a police badge, which she paid for with a personal check. Additionally, a hardware store employee provided a third report, stating that approximately a week before Sherry was abducted, Diana had also visited the store and purchased an axe. She drew attention with her striking makeup, which was particularly bold and set her apart from the others, although the guest wished to remain anonymous. She paid with a check in her own name, establishing a direct link to the potential crime. The police collected physical evidence and later discovered an axe at Diana's residence, which was sent for forensic testing. Surprisingly, tests found no trace of Diana's blood. Suggesting the axe was not used in the murder, the police determined that Diana had carefully planned Sherry's abduction the day before. She had purchased a brown suit, shoes, superglue, large garbage bags, toiletries, lighter fluid, matches, sunglasses, and other items that could have been instrumental in the abduction. As a result, the police were able to piece together a possible timeline of the events surrounding the abduction. Sherry may not have recognized Diana when she wore the wig and glasses, which could explain why she did not resist during the arrest, however. When they were close together and Sherry got into the rental car, it was clear that she recognized Diana sitting in the back seat. Sherry attempted to escape by screaming and doing her best to block Diana from driving away. During her resistance, Sherry scratched Diana's forehead based on the blood found in the car. It is possible that Sherry was killed shortly afterward in the back seat. Diana was eventually arrested, and it was discovered that she was in possession of a pen containing the same blue ink that was involved in the case. Attention then turned to Michael, as he seemed to have been aware of his mistress Diana's plans, given his suspicious behavior at a press conference. There were indications that he might have been the instigator of the crime. The police suggested that Sherry's husband, Michael, be investigated for possible involvement in the murder. Following this revelation, the police department received numerous calls from drug dealers and people in the escort service industry, all reporting that Michael regularly used drugs and hired escorts. One escort revealed that on the day Sherry went missing, she had met Michael, who had taken her out of town. This information attracted the attention of the police as the investigation progressed. On June 1, 1996, near Kaduna Larga Road, on the edge of a cliff, police discovered women's shoes and sunglasses belonging to Diana. Shortly thereafter, they found the body of a woman. Dental records confirmed that the body belonged to Sherry, who had gone missing. Forensic examinations revealed that Sherry had been stabbed about a dozen times, mostly in the neck and upper chest. A forensic expert determined that a serrated knife was the murder weapon, with multiple stab wounds to Sherry's body indicating a violent and deliberate attack, particularly to the face. This evidence suggested a personal grudge against Sherry after the murder. Sherry's body was dumped outside the city. Worryingly, Michael had been socializing with an escort just meters from where Sherry's body was found. Suggesting his possible involvement in the crime, the police gathered enough evidence to charge Michael. Further investigations revealed that Diana had lured Sherry into her car before killing her. Notably, hair from Diana's wig was found on Sherry, and the wig was later recovered. Diana's trial was initially held. With her facing charges of kidnapping and murder, the attorney took a fairly passive approach to defending his client, focusing primarily on minimizing the severity of the sentence by arguing that the murder was not intentional. However, the evidence presented clearly demonstrated that Diana had meticulously planned the attack. After brief deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Diana Hahn was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the hearing, Diana testified against Michael, claiming that he had urged her to kill Sherry. However, Diana's testimony was not the most crucial factor in the prosecution's success. Just before the hearing began, another woman came forward to the police, revealing that she had been in a relationship with Michael shortly before the murder. She stated that he had also urged her to kill his wife, Sherry. According to her account, Michael not only sought to kill his wife, but also requested that it be done in the cruelest way possible. Wishing for Sherry to suffer for a long time before dying, this woman considered his request a joke and refused to comply. The woman then decided to end her relationship with Michael, who was behaving in a troubled manner. After discovering the tragic events that had occurred, she contacted the police. The prosecution presented evidence that Michael's motive for the murder was a desire to avoid a prolonged divorce and custody battle, as well as to secure the financial benefit of Sherry's life insurance policy, from which he had received $50. Meanwhile, Michael's attorney presented a defense, largely arguing that Michael was a victim of circumstances due to Sherry's refusal to file for divorce. Ultimately, Michael Daly was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole after Sherry's death. Custody of her children was awarded to their grandparents. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Manijay Staran. Manijay Staran was born on May 23, 1989. Little is known about her childhood, except that she had an older brother by the age of 34. She was living in a small apartment and struggling financially. She also dealt with mental health issues. Manijay worked hard to overcome these challenges to create a safe and comfortable environment for her children. But it was a difficult journey. Her relatives had to help care for her children. Her life continued without major changes until something unexpected happened. On May 1, 2023, the St. Paul police received a disturbing call from Manijay's father. He had last spoken to her on April 23, and she seemed very scared. He believed that she was afraid of her boyfriend. The police began searching for her, but did not find her in her apartment. A man who claimed to be the father of one of Manijay's children also reported that he had not heard from her for a long time. It was unusual for her to go silent for so long, as she was in regular contact with him because they had a child together, according to him. Their last conversation had been on April 21, 2023. The police also spoke with a neighbor of Manijay's who had disturbing information. One day, she noticed a bruise under Manijay's eye and a red mark on her neck. When the neighbor asked if she had been attacked, Manijay confirmed that she had. The neighbor suggested calling the police, but Manijay begged her not to, fearing it would make things worse. This allegation of assault further complicated the investigation and added to the complexity of Manijay's situation. A number of important pieces of information were uncovered, revealing that Manijay had a boyfriend named Joseph Stephen Jorgensen, who frequently visited her apartment, although his last name was not listed on the lease. The manager provided the police with his phone number. It was confirmed that the phone number belonged to Joseph, a man in his 40s. The manager identified him in a photo, confirming that he was the one who had visited Manijay. This discovery was a major development in the case. The police obtained recordings from surveillance cameras located near the apartment, which provided crucial evidence. At 6 p.m. on April 23, the cameras recorded Manijay, clearly upset. Hurriedly leaving her apartment, she was quickly tackled by Joseph, who pulled her inside. This is the last recorded footage. Video analysis showed Joseph frequently entering and exiting the apartment between April 21 and April 28. The manager raised concerns when he mentioned that there was only one set of keys for residents, despite the footage clearly showing Joseph using his own key to open the door each time. At approximately 5 p.m. on April 28, Joseph was caught on camera leaving the apartment with a suitcase and a duffel bag. He loaded the luggage into a pickup truck and drove away quickly. Police later discovered that the truck belonged to a resident of the apartment building. Police also spoke with a friend of Manijay, who had valuable information about her lifestyle. and her relationship with Joseph. The friend explained that although Manijay struggled with drug addiction, she always kept in touch with her family and never went more than a day without contacting them. Therefore, her absence for several days raised alarms. The friend also recounted a phone conversation with Joseph after Manijay went missing. Joseph claimed that Manijay went to the store but did not return, according to the family friend. Joseph expressed concern that a man named Kyle might pose a threat to Manijay. After Manijay went missing, Joseph took no action. He did not report her absence to the police and continued with his daily life. He was the last person to be in the apartment before she went missing. Concerned and with mounting evidence, police entered Manijay's apartment with the building manager and quickly discovered alarming signs. The bedroom window was broken. In the living room, they found a television with a severely cracked screen, which the manager confirmed had never been damaged before. As they continued their search, police found broken glass on the microwave, with shards scattered throughout the bedroom. The mattress had a large hole in it, and there were red marks on the bed, which raised suspicions. The anxiety surrounding Manijay's disappearance grew, revealing a troubling array of evidence. On May 25, after completing the necessary legal procedures, officers obtained a search warrant and processed Manijay's apartment for vital evidence. Experts discovered a disturbing scene. There was a large amount of blood in the living room and kitchen, especially on the sofa and floor. Police confirmed that efforts had been made to clean up the scene. It was clear that someone had been seriously injured or possibly dead in the apartment. Preliminary analysis confirmed that blood samples taken from the scene belonged to Manijay. As officers continued their investigation, they uncovered important information about her finances. They discovered that she had received government assistance in Minnesota through electronic benefit transfers, which allow recipients to make purchases directly at retail stores. Police quickly realized the significance of this discovery and obtained a warrant to access Manijay's account records. They found a series of transactions made after her disappearance. One notable transaction occurred on May 9, 2023, when Joseph used Manijay's card to withdraw cash from a highway ATM. That same day, he made a purchase at a store, buying items such as a cleaning bucket, 2 boxes of paper towels, trash bags, liquid detergent, gloves, and disinfectant wipes. The strange combination of items aroused the police's suspicions. On May 11, Joseph used Manijay's card again, this time at a grocery store. He also went to a hardware store, where he purchased more paper towels, cleaning supplies, and disinfectant wipes. The repeated purchases of these items further raised concerns about Joseph's actions and intentions. Police obtained a warrant to access information associated with Joseph's Google account. After reviewing the data, they discovered a series of significant internet searches made by him. On May 1, he searched for how to report a missing person. On May 3, Joseph searched for methods to delete files. On May 23, he inquired about removing Jeeps from a scooter. Finally, on June 4, he read about lime for soil. It is important to note that lime is a substance that can accelerate the decomposition of a body and eliminate the associated odor. The investigation team was aware of this, raising their concerns about Joseph's potential involvement in Manijay's disappearance. With compelling evidence against him, they obtained a search warrant for his home. On June 26, a special weapons and tactics team arrived at Joseph's home, prepared for a potentially dangerous situation. When police confronted him in the apartment, he resisted and barricaded himself in his bedroom, shocking everyone present. He lit a fire to escalate the situation. The special weapons and tactics team proceeded with extreme caution, but were unable to apprehend him. He resisted aggressively and even attempted to grab one of the officers' weapons. Joseph was eventually restrained and taken to a local hospital for evaluation to rule out any mental health issues that might have influenced his behavior at the time of his arrest. There were 2 other people in the apartment, including an unidentified woman. She was injured, with bruises, scratches, and a red mark on her neck. The woman later reported to the police that Joseph had choked her and threatened her with violence. Claiming that the neighbors would not hear her screams, the second person living in the apartment was Joseph's roommate. When the task force arrived, he hid in his bedroom, where he was discovered and arrested. He later informed the St. Paul Police Department that he had suffered a traumatic brain injury, which had resulted in a loss of smell. He also mentioned his long-standing relationship with Joseph and explained that, due to his busy Monday through Friday work schedule, he rarely interacted with Joseph or the women Joseph brought to the apartment. The roommate also noted that he had only met Manije once or twice and emphasized that he did not have a close relationship with her. When the roommate asked Joseph about Manije's whereabouts, Joseph told him that she had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital. The man also admitted that he had used Manije's money. Joseph had given him her card and PIN, leading him to believe that he had access to the account. Police interviewed the manager of the residential complex where Joseph lived. He reported that on May 15 or 16, 2023, residents complained about a foul odor coming from Joseph's apartment. The manager noted that it resembled the stench of a dead animal. To determine the source of the odor, on May 18, the manager and a maintenance worker attempted to enter Joseph's apartment to investigate. However, Joseph acted aggressively and blocked their path. The manager then instructed Joseph and his roommate to clean the apartment and gave them a week to do so. Shortly thereafter, both the manager and maintenance staff saw Joseph carrying large black duffel bags out of the apartment. The sight shocked witnesses, who began to speculate about what might be in the bags. The forensic team from the St. Paul Police Department conducted an investigation of Joseph's apartment. During the search, they discovered more evidence. Their report noted a significant amount of blood in the bathroom and in his closet. There was a foul odor in his home that matched the odors reported by residents. They also discovered other biological material found in the home. After arresting Joseph, the police accessed Jeep's data from his phone, which pointed to a storage facility where Joseph rented a room with a refrigerator through his roommate. Realizing the importance of this clue, they obtained a search warrant for the storage facility. On June 28, the police began investigating the location. As they approached the storage facility, they immediately smelled a very unpleasant odor. The police decided to cut the lock to gain access. Once inside, they discovered containers wrapped in plastic, a blue gym bag, and a small suitcase. Notably, one of these bags was similar to the one Joseph was seen carrying out of Manije's apartment in the surveillance footage. They also found a green bag containing cleaning products similar to those Joseph had previously purchased, sitting on top of the refrigerator. On the advice of forensic experts, the police carefully removed the containers and sports bags from the refrigerator, from which the foul odor was emanating. The contents were inaccessible until they were sent to the medical examiner for further analysis. After X-rays were taken, it was discovered that all of the containers contained human remains. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner then conducted an autopsy and determined that all of the body parts were carefully packaged, wrapped in multiple layers of paper, film, and bags. Opening these packed remains was a laborious process. Tests confirmed that the remains belonged to Manije Starin. With identification made through her tattoos and dental records, the police again reviewed surveillance footage from Manije's home. Focusing on the bags Joseph carried, he had handling of the body Manije's in her apartment. Sorting her remains into different bags and carrying them out, Joseph faces multiple charges, including second-degree murder and arson for setting fire to his apartment during a confrontation with the Special Weapons and Tactics team. He is also charged with threatening and disarming a police officer. On June 30, 2023, Joseph Stephen Jorgensen had an afternoon court hearing regarding the murder charge. Throughout the trial, Joseph shook his head while listening to the assistant district attorney announce that his bail was set at $5 million. The judge remained largely silent throughout the proceedings. Joseph's attorney requested a bail hearing for later. It is believed that a detailed defense strategy is currently being developed. On the same day, Joseph appeared in court. St. Paul Police Sergeant Ernsta held a press conference to discuss a significant event that occurred during the ongoing investigation. Fanta Zayavong was also reported missing. She was last seen in July 2021 with Joseph. This new information prompted the police to immediately begin searching for her. During the press conference, it was announced that Fanta Zayavong's remains had been discovered in a separate storage facility in North Minneapolis, approximately 30 miles from where Manija's body was found. Details about the second victim have not been released, but many believe that Joseph was directly involved in her murder. Manija's family has expressed gratitude to the police for any leads in the ongoing investigation. If Joseph is convicted of second-degree murder, he could face a maximum sentence of 40 years in prison. His next court appearance, originally scheduled for August 21, has been postponed for unknown reasons. Joseph Stephen Jorgensen remains in custody at the Ramsey County Jail. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case, the case of Saga Elneborg. Saga Elneborg was a 20-year-old girl who was 7 months pregnant at the time. She was in a relationship with her boyfriend, Mohammedaman Dirisek Ibrahim, the father of her child. They had been together for about 2 years and were expecting a baby boy. With doctors confirming that the pregnancy was progressing well, Saga was eagerly looking forward to becoming a mother in just a few weeks and had carefully prepared for the birth of her child during this time. She shared pictures of her growing belly and many items she had bought for her future child on social media. She was especially fond of posting pictures of children's clothes. On April 28, 2023, Saga had scheduled a meeting with her boyfriend, Mohammed Amin, to discuss their relationship. That day, she informed her mother that Mohammed Amin was planning to visit her home, so Melissa decided not to interrupt their conversation. Saga's family was very cautious about her relationship with someone from a different culture, especially since they knew that challenges could arise when meeting Mohammed Amin's family from Somalia. At that time, Mohammed Amin was standing outside Saga's apartment door when he entered the house. Saga began to share some of the problems they were having in their relationship. Saga still loved Mohammed Amin and wanted their relationship to succeed. However, she felt uncomfortable when he often hid her from his parents, which caused conflicts between them. On April 29, 2023, at around 1 p.m., Saga's mother, Melissa, came to her daughter's apartment to support her and help gather her belongings in preparation for the arrival of her grandson. When Melissa arrived at the apartment, she was talking on the phone with her other daughter. She rang the doorbell several times, but no one answered, which surprised her. She knocked on the door, used the intercom, and even called Saga's phone and sent a text message. What puzzled she was that there was still no response from Saga. She thought that her daughter might have forgotten about her visit and gone out to run an errand. Although Melissa had a spare key, she noticed that the door was unlocked as she approached, which seemed very suspicious. Saga was always careful to lock the door. Even when she stepped out for a moment to get the mail or do the laundry, there was no way she would leave the door open. When she entered the apartment, Melissa heard the sound of running water in the kitchen, so she rushed in to turn it off. She called out to her daughter, but there was no answer. When Melissa entered her daughter's bedroom, she found the lights off, and the darkness made her feel uneasy. When Melissa turned on the light, she was horrified to see her daughter lying on the floor. Saga was there, with a light cord wrapped around her neck. The scene was even more terrifying because a heavy table had fallen over. Melissa rushed to her daughter's side, pushed the table aside, and carefully removed the cord from her neck. She then called emergency services while attempting to give her daughter first aid. The first thing she noticed was that Saga's body was stiff and very cold, indicating that she had been dead for a considerable amount of time. Paramedics arrived quickly, but unfortunately, both Saga and her unborn child were dead. The police who arrived began an investigation and noted that she had suffered head and facial injuries. The crime scene was covered in dried blood, and jewelry boxes were found upside down on the floor. There were no signs of forced entry, but the police initially considered that she had taken her own life. However, after reviewing data from Saga's cell phone, they concluded that she could not have ended her life by herself. Saga had no mental health problems. She was cheerful and lively. Especially during her pregnancy, she was eagerly awaiting the birth of her child and could never have harmed herself or her baby. Forensic experts collected a significant amount of evidence at the crime scene, including fingerprints, blood, and DNA from under Saga's fingernails and from her belongings for analysis. The forensic expert concluded that Saga died of strangulation, with an estimated time of death between 1 and 3 in the morning. On the forensic expert's desk were not only Saga's body, but also the body of her newborn baby. Weighing 1.7 kg, tests showed that the baby was completely healthy. This was a devastating shock to Saga's mother, family, and friends. The police quickly launched an investigation into the messages from Saga's relatives. The first person they spoke to was her mother, Melissa. She explained that on April 28, her daughter had planned to meet some friends at a local restaurant. Melissa noticed that her daughter seemed very anxious and was checking her phone frequently. Saga said that she did not want to miss a message from her boyfriend, Mohammed Amin. Melissa revealed that he had already informed his parents about Saga. However, before that, Mohammed Amin had been extremely anxious and nearly had a nervous breakdown because he feared that his parents would not approve of his relationship with Saga. His parents are Muslims with strict conservative beliefs. In contrast, Saga is a Swedish citizen with Thai and European heritage, and she holds more modern views. Mohammed Amin and his family are refugees. His parents brought him to Europe when he was a child. Although he grew up in Europe and embraced modernity, he still valued his family's traditions. Another important issue was the difference in religion. Mohammed Amin's family was Muslim, while Saga's relatives were Christian. This difference in beliefs and traditions often led to conflict, straining their relationship. After dining at the restaurant, Saga said goodbye to her mother and friends, who wished her well, not knowing that it would be the last time they would see her alive. Tragically, after returning home, Saga was murdered. Police suspect that Mohammed Amin may have informed his family about his relationship with Saga, which may have provoked their violent reaction and ultimately led to the tragedy. During the initial stages of the investigation, the police looked into whether Mohammed Amin's relatives were involved in the murder. His mother had raised suspicions when she left home late at night. However, it was later confirmed that she had only gone to the shop and returned after about 15 minutes. There was no evidence that his relatives were involved in the case. The police also discovered that one day, Mohammed Amin's mother found the car he was using parked near Saga's house. At that time, his mother suspected he was having a romantic relationship with a Christian woman. After discovering this, Mohammed Amin's mother was furious. She informed him that he was no longer welcome in their home. She felt that if he did not respect their traditions, it would be easier to cut ties with him. In his defense, Mohammed Amin claimed that he had never visited those people and that he had convinced her of that. However, according to Melissa, their relationship had deteriorated since Saga became pregnant. It was rumored that Mohammed Amin wanted her to have an abortion because he was afraid of his family's reaction. Despite this pressure, Saga decided to continue with the pregnancy and give birth. She said that if necessary, she could raise the child herself. In October, Saga shared the news of her pregnancy with her family, and everyone was very happy at that time. Her relationship with her boyfriend was not good, as they often had conflicts due to cultural differences, which made communication difficult. Saga felt that if Mohammed Amin did not change his views. It would be difficult for them to connect, however. A few months later, things seemed to improve. He began to adapt to her lifestyle and accepted the pregnancy. Appearing happy to be a father, Saga then moved into a larger apartment with a nursery, which she began to decorate. By March 2023, they were still together, but there were some troubling signs in their relationship. A friend confided in Saga that Mohammedan had tried to convince her that she needed to kick Saga in the stomach multiple times to induce a miscarriage. Saga was furious when she learned about this, but Mohammed Amin insisted that it was all a fabrication. Melissa knew about these disturbing events, but did not want to accept them as true. However, now that her daughter was dead, it was clear that Mohammed Amin's intention to harm Saga was real. The police began to piece together a timeline of events and soon discovered that Mohammed Amin and Saga had planned to spend that evening together. However, he seemed to be avoiding Saga, intentionally staying late at work to avoid seeing her that evening. Saga spoke to him. She told Mohammed Amin that he needed to tell his family about their relationship, the move, and her pregnancy, or they would break up. On April 28, Saga was waiting to hear from him, according to Melissa. Her daughter seemed quite anxious during this time. The police reviewed cell phone records and confirmed that Saga had been in contact with Mohammed Amin until 11 p.m. on April 28. He had said that he would not inform his parents about Saga and their relationship, stating that his family was more important than having an illegitimate child. Saga felt disappointed with his decision and tried to convince him to reconsider. She argued that if they broke up, his family would eventually find out about the child because she had planned to seek financial support from him after discussing their situation. Mohammed Amin agreed to tell his family about Saga and the baby. He expressed his anxiety, saying that he felt like his heart was going to burst. This was the last message he sent her before she was killed. Police believe that Saga's determination to reveal the truth and her ability to tell his parents herself motivated Mohammed Amin to attack the girl. He remains the only suspect in the case. Mohammed Amin was brought in for questioning. He claimed he had nothing to do with the incident and stated that on the night of the murder, he had returned home to confess to his parents about his relationship with Saga. However, geolocation data showed that this was not true. Mohammed Amin had, in fact, gone to his girlfriend's apartment when told that he was the prime suspect in Saga's murder. Mohammed Amin became defensive. He insisted he was innocent and had an alibi, claiming that he was driving with a friend at the time of Saga's murder. However, the friend was on the phone with someone else and refused to testify, despite his alibi failing. Mohammed Amin maintained that he last saw Saga on the evening of April 27. Mohammed Amin stated that he had confessed their relationship to his parents. However, the police discovered that he had never spent a full night at her new apartment, as he was afraid his family would find out. Due to Mohammed Amin's suspicious behavior, the police decided to arrest him and keep him in custody while they continued their investigation. He was detained for several months. Eventually, the prosecution gathered strong evidence against him, claiming it was sufficient to ensure victory in court. The investigation even involved specially trained dogs, which helped identify some of the evidence. Mohammed Amin's lawyer argued that the dogs' findings should not be the main basis of the case, as they were not a reliable source of information. However, there was still much more evidence against him. DNA analysis and a review of the evidence took quite a while, but eventually confirmed the truth of the case. Mohammed Amin wrapped an electric cord around Saga's neck while she was sleeping on the sofa. He then dragged Saga to the floor and attempted to push her onto her stomach in an effort to force her to terminate the pregnancy. Despite her best efforts to protect her child, Saga sustained injuries to her hip. Mohammed Amin then attempted to strangle Saga, pressing the edge of the table against her throat. Exhausted and unable to lift the heavy object, Saga suffocated When she died, the table was still pressed against her throat, leaving a deep dent after committing the crime. Mohammed Amin tried to make it look like a robbery by throwing some boxes around. The defense argued that Saga was the victim of real robbers who stole money and various household items. However, the prosecutor believed that Mohammed Amin's actions only added to his guilt. Several missing items were later discovered during a search of his home. He claimed that these items were either his or gifts from his girlfriend. A key piece of evidence against him was his DNA found under Saga's fingernails. In addition, a forensic expert determined that Saga had been abused before her death. Mohammed Amin claimed that the act was consensual and had occurred a few days before her death. However, the prosecution cast doubt on his testimony, highlighting inconsistencies and lies in his statements during interrogation. Police found multiple traces of his DNA in Saga's apartment. The investigation revealed some disturbing searches by Mohammed Amin. Notably, he searched whether kicking a mother in the stomach could harm her unborn child. The prosecutor's office believes that instead of visiting his family, Mohammed Amin went to Saga's apartment. He never intended to tell his family about her for fear of their reaction, but Saga pressured him with her demands. In response, he killed her. Motivated by fear of his parents, the defense argued that the DNA found under Saga's fingernails could have been there long before the murder. However, Melissa, Saga's mother, insisted that her daughter was very clean and had showered shortly before her death. She knew this, especially during Saga's pregnancy. As her daughter was meticulous about her personal hygiene, it is clear that Saga had showered and changed into clean clothes, meaning that the DNA evidence found on her body and belongings was still fresh and must have been left behind during the attack. Curiously, after Saga's death, Mohammed Amin quickly deleted her from Snapchat and removed his social media accounts. The police found that he was trying to hide his connection to the crime. Fortunately, the deleted data was easily recovered and added to the evidence against him. Although there was no direct evidence, Mohammed Amin's behavior clearly showed that he was indifferent to his girlfriend, Saga. During the investigation, it was noted that he was a short distance from her apartment while continuing to communicate with her from afar. He neither approached nor left, as if he were waiting for something. It is possible that during this time, he was trying to muster the courage to attack or wanted to ensure that Saga was asleep. At 2 a.m., Mohammed Amin's cell phone signal went off. He then turned on his phone to try to contact his friend, but his call was ignored. An active call signal from him was detected in the same residential area where Saga lived. This evidence helped the police uncover another lie by Mohammed Amin. He claimed that during this time, he was at home with his parents. However, Mohammed Amin's cell phone only became active at 2:16 a.m., which matched the forensic expert's conclusion about the time of death of Saga and her child. Mohammed Amin's story kept changing. At one point, he fabricated a story about a gang of robbers. He claimed to have hidden a bag of money in Saga's home, but he never explained where he obtained the large sum. According to Mohammed Amin, the robbers broke into Saga's home to steal the cash. Saga tried to stop the robbers, which ultimately led to her murder. The prosecutor's office rejected this idea. As there were no signs of forced entry at the crime scene, it was clear that Saga had either let the killer into her home willingly or that he had a key to her apartment. Mohammed Amin had a motive for the crime. During his 9 months in prison, he never confessed and steadfastly denied any involvement. However, the prosecutor's office gathered a significant amount of evidence, both direct and indirect, to support their case. Although he did not admit to the crime, he expressed fear about telling his family about Saga. He claimed to love her and even the child, but he believed his conservative parents would disown him for dating a European girl. After hearing arguments from both the prosecution and the defense, the jury deliberated on the verdict. On June 9, 20 24. They unanimously found Mohammed Amin Abdirisek Ibrahim guilty of the premeditated murder of Saga Elneborg, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Despite this, he maintained that he loved both Saga and his unborn child. Claiming that he never intended to harm them, he insisted that violence was not part of his character and that this was the first crime he had ever committed. The investigation revealed that Mohammed Amin had been seeing other women regularly during the 2 years of his relationship with Saga, although he denied any extramarital affairs. Evidence showed that he had numerous meetings with different girls, some of which became intimate. This information further tarnished his reputation. His defense attorney, meanwhile, argued that Mohammed Amin was innocent and that Saga had been the victim of an attempted robbery. The attorney promised to fight for his freedom and intended to appeal the jury's decision. An appeal was filed shortly after the decision was announced, but the final outcome remains unclear. Although Mohammed Amin was charged with Saga's murder, he was never charged in connection with the death of his unborn child, which angered Saga's family. The investigation attracted considerable public and media attention. The tragedy once again highlighted issues surrounding migrants, especially those from Muslim countries, who have been arriving in Sweden more frequently in recent years. Many people have noted that these migrants struggle to integrate into European society and often refuse to accept individuals from different cultures. A violent murder arising from cultural and religious differences sparked public outrage and prompted calls for government action. Some defended Mohammed Amin, claiming he was innocent. His family argued that he had no violent tendencies, and many believed in his innocence, offering him strong support. According to relatives, Mohammed Amin was not ready to be a father, but he maintained that he loved his girlfriend and son, even after their tragic deaths. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Richard McCroskey. In September 2009, 4 people were attacked in their home. The bodies were there for days before the police arrived. The victims were Emma Niederbrock, 16, her friend Melanie Wells, 18, and Emma's parents, Mark Niederbrock, 50, and Deborah Kelly, 53. In today's video, we explore the complex chain of events that led to the deaths of these 4 individuals. Mark's family lived in Farmville, Virginia. He graduated from State College and worked as a graphic designer. Mark found his faith and chose to become a pastor, serving at the Hicksburg Church and earning respect in the community. His wife, Deborah, earned her doctorate and became an associate professor of sociology and criminology at Longwood University in Farmville on October 15, 1992. Mark and Deborah welcomed their daughter, Emma Niederbrock. Although she was initially a well-adjusted child, she eventually faced common emotional challenges during adolescence. When Emma was around 15, her parents decided to homeschool her, which led to intense feelings of isolation and frustration. This struggle pushed her into a long-lasting rebellious phase in early 2009, when her parents divorced. Emma's life became even more chaotic. Although they maintained a good relationship, the divorce took a toll on her. During this time, she discovered horrorcore music, which resonated with her through its lyrics for many fans. These lyrics expressed repressed anger and frustration, feeling isolated in her small town of Farmville. Emma found solace in online horror forums, where she met Melanie, an older girl from Virginia, who understood her struggles. Both girls had fathers who were Presbyterian ministers and bonded over their shared frustration with living in such a restrictive environment. Emma met a horror artist on the forums named Richard Samuel McCroskey. born December 26, 1988. He lived with his sister and parents in Castro Valley, California. Those who knew Richard described him as quiet and somewhat submissive. He was bullied at school for his weight and red hair, which made him feel like an outsider. Richard enjoyed this isolation and developed unique interests that set him apart from his peers, notably. He had a strong dislike for music as a child. However, while at the dentist, his father played a CD by Insane Clown Posse, and Richard was instantly drawn to the band. He then borrowed his father's CD to make a copy, which sparked his passion for music. Richard became interested in horror music around the time he was struggling in school. He faced bullying and had trouble fitting into the traditional education system, which caused him to drop out of 2 high schools. It is important to note that Richard was very intelligent. He had a talent for graphic design and even dreamed of starting his own company. However, his passion for horror music eventually took a different direction. Soon after, Richard bought a cheap microphone and began recording his own music under the name Seco Sam. His lyrics described violent fantasies and the desire to harm others. He uploaded some of his songs to his MySpace page and became heavily involved in the horror music community. Other horror music artists accepted him, and despite the dark nature of his work, he still showed real talent in songwriting. After starting his YouTube channel in 2006, Richard uploaded a variety of content, including concert recordings and disturbing videos. In 2008, when he was 19, he began a relationship with 15-year-old Emma. They quickly bonded and began talking on the phone every day. Richard believed that Emma loved him and genuinely wanted to be with him. Despite the distance between them, they exchanged videos to learn more about each other. While his relationship with Emma blossomed, Richard faced some serious problems at home. His father kicked his mother out of the house in April 2009, which may have strengthened his relationship with Emma, whose parents had also split up just a few months earlier. Emma, Richard, and Melanie made plans to meet in September for a horror music festival called Strictly for the Wicked. Richard began going to Farmville, while Melanie flew in and stayed with Emma and Deborah. Deborah was initially nervous about letting an older guy stay with her daughter. However, seeing Emma happy for the first time since her divorce, she changed her mind. She agreed to let Richard stay, but insisted that she and Mark accompany the trio to the Horrorcore Music Festival. Emma posted on Richard's MySpace, expressing her love for him and her excitement at finally meeting him. Unfortunately, things did not go as Emma had expected. Richard acted immaturely, which disappointed Emma. However, since they had planned to attend the festival, she decided to be polite and go along. It was also a chance to see her favorite horrorcore bands. Even though Richard had disappointed her, she knew that she could still enjoy the festival with Melanie. Richard was probably excited to spend time with Emma, whom he considered his girlfriend. However, Emma had other intentions. Those close to her noted that she never referred to Richard as her boyfriend. They were just getting to know each other. Richard may have misinterpreted their relationship. Witnesses reported that Richard was upset when he saw Emma flirting with other guys. She deliberately avoided him, which may have further upset Richard. Tensions rose when Emma exchanged phone numbers with another guy. Richard then invaded her privacy by checking her messages and discovered that the guy had asked Emma to be his girlfriend. Although Richard was emotionally disturbed, no one around him noticed anything unusual. The group then returned to Farmville at approximately 2:43 a.m. Melanie posted on MySpace about the fun she had at the show, how much she missed her family, and that she would be returning home on the 16th. While she was posting, Richard was drinking, using illegal substances, and taking strong painkillers. At approximately 3 a.m. on September 14, Richard took a hammer from Emma's backyard and went upstairs. He entered Melanie's room and struck her on the head. Killing her instantly, he then entered Emma's mother, Deborah's room, and killed her as well. After that, he entered Emma's room. While it is unclear what happened next, it is possible that Richard watched her sleep and imagined the life he thought they could have together. He eventually attacked Emma, delivering fatal blows to her face after the murders. Richard was at a loss for what to do next in his chaotic mental state. He chose to record videos of himself in these recordings. He talked about the terrible acts he had committed, acknowledging that people would despise him for it. But he felt he had no choice because he had lost control in the videos. He expressed remorse for his actions and conveyed love for his family. On a darker note, Richard spent 3 days in the house with the people he had hurt. He did not shower, and it was unclear if he even ate or slept by September 16th. However, he could no longer hide from reality. Melanie's mother had been trying to contact her for days, knowing that Melanie would return on the 16th. She became worried when there was still no news and asked her husband to go to Farmville to check on her. He waited 8 hours outside Deborah's house. He kept knocking and calling, but no one answered. So he went home. The next day, Melanie's mother called Deborah's house phone. Richard answered and informed Melanie's mother that the girls were visiting Emma's father, which prompted her to contact Mark. Mark said that Emma and Melanie were not with him and that he had not heard from them for several days, realizing that something was wrong. Mark went to his ex-wife Deborah's house, where Richard was staying, around 5 p.m. when Mark entered the house. Richard immediately attacked him after killing Mark. Richard dragged his and Melanie's bodies into Emma's room. Melanie's mother became increasingly concerned when Mark stopped answering her phone calls. She called Richard again, and this time he insisted that he did not know where the girls were. He mentioned hearing strange noises coming from the basement. Melanie's mother instructed him to call 911, which he did. When Richard called 911, he stated that he had heard a noise in the basement and was too scared to investigate. He asked the police to come and help him check what the noise in the basement was. He also informed them that the house was not his. He was at his girlfriend's house when the police arrived to assist him. They noticed a foul odor, however. The police did not find any reason to investigate further. They felt satisfied with the explanation Richard provided and left the crime scene. Strangely, the police did not notice the dried blood on Richard. When the police left, he escaped. He found Mark's car keys and drove away. Meanwhile, Melanie's mother repeatedly called the police, urging them to take action regarding her missing daughter, forcing the police to return to the crime scene once more. By this time, Richard was gone. The front door was unlocked, and when the police entered, they smelled a foul odor. They searched the house and discovered 4 bodies, prompting them to launch an investigation into the events that had occurred while trying to get to the airport. Richard, an inexperienced driver, caused a car accident. He was arrested by the police that night, however, because he had not yet been identified as a murder suspect. He was only charged with driving without a license, a misdemeanor. This allowed him to leave as long as he promised to attend court. A tow truck driver came to tow the car and asked Richard if he wanted a ride, which he accepted. Requesting to be dropped off at a nearby gas station during the trip, the tow truck driver noticed a strong, foul odor coming from Richard, describing it as the worst odor he had ever encountered. Upon arriving at the gas station, Richard was captured on surveillance footage, purchasing several items. He then went to the airport to purchase a ticket home. Unfortunately for him, he did not have enough money for his next flight, so he had to wait until the next morning with nowhere else to go. He fell asleep in the waiting area. Eventually, the police identified Richard as a suspect and issued an arrest warrant for him by any means necessary. Airport security captured video footage of him, and a security guard alerted the police to his location. Resulting in Richard's arrest, the police initially tried to link him to 2 other murders in the area and charged him with 6 counts of premeditated murder. 2 of those charges were later dropped. But Richard Samuel McCroskey still faced the death penalty on the remaining 4. He eventually pleaded guilty in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence from the judge and was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Richard is currently incarcerated at Wallens Ridge State Prison in Big Stone Gap, Virginia. There are reports that other inmates dislike Richard and often bully him. Although these claims have not been verified, Melanie's parents may find comfort in knowing that he is no longer capable of harming anyone.